Chapter 2148. Slaughter them just like that. After receiving Yi Xian's order, Tu Chen and the others beside him immediately rushed out. In an instant, the entire temple was covered in corpses. The old man looked at Yi Xian and said fiercely, "My temple is backed by the Profound Sword Celestial Sect." The Profound Sword Celestial Sect. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly. When he'd just attained the Sacred Heart Realm, he'd encountered a mysterious expert who called himself the Profound Sword Celestial Sect as soon as he entered the chaotic world. When he saw Yi Xian's expression, the old man said fiercely, "Looks like you've heard of the Profound Sword Celestial Sect." Yi Xian smiled slightly, "So what?" The old man stared at Yi Xian, "We're from the Profound Sword Celestial Sect." Yi Xian smiled, "Is that all?" The old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian, "You dare to disregard the Profound Sword Celestial Sect?" Yi Xian opened his palm and the azure sword suddenly flew out. In an instant, all the remaining experts from the Immortal Dao sect were slaughtered. Tu Zong. The old man's expression changed greatly. You dare to disregard the Profound Sword Celestial Sect?" Yi Xian ignored the old man and turned to look to the right. There was a woman standing in the clouds tens of thousands of meters away. It was Envoy Nan. Yi Xian looked at Envoy Nan and said, "Miss Envoy Nan, I, Yi Xian, repay kindness with kindness and enmity with enmity. You helped me that day, so I'm willing to be schemed against by you and repay your kindness. We're truly even. From today onwards, if you dare to scheme against me again, then you're my enemy. Since you're my enemy, then I, Yi Xian, will not show mercy." With that, he turned and left. Gazing at Yi Xian in the distance, the southern ambassador remained silent. As Yi Xian left, Tu Chen and the others hurried to follow him. They didn't kill the old man because they couldn't. If a Saint Heart Realm expert did not want to fight and wanted to leave, they would not be able to kill him. The old man naturally did not dare to stop Yi Xian and the others. What a joke, he was alone now, how could he dare to stop Yi Xian and the others? At this moment, the old man calmed down. Yi Xian was not afraid of the Mystic Sword Celestial Sect. If one did not know about the Mystic Sword Immortal Sect, one would be ignorant and fearless. However, Yi Xian knew about the Mystic Sword Immortal Sect and was not afraid. What did this mean? It meant that he was confident. The old man turned to look at Envoy Nan in the distance as if he had thought of something. His face was extremely gloomy. "Envoy Nan, you're underestimating the Mystic Sword Celestial Sect. They were able to dominate the Chaos world for so many years. How could they be fools? You will suffer the consequences of your own actions." With that, he turned around and left. The southern envoy remained silent for a long time before he turned around and left. On the other side, Yi Xian left Universe Observatory with everyone and returned to the Profound World. After Yi Xian returned to the Profound World, he immediately brought Tu Chen and the four gods to Xiao Ta. Of course, heavenly execution and earthly extermination were also included. It had to be said that Tu Chen and the others were petrified after entering Xiao Ta. Time was different. Yi Xian opened his palm and placed all the star veins and heart of the universe that he had collected before in front of everyone. He looked at them and said, "Your goal is the Sacred Heart Realm." The Sacred Heart Realm. Everyone was stunned. It was extremely difficult to attain the Sacred Heart Realm because one had to temper their heart of the universe over and over again. This process was painful and difficult. It could be described as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Yi Xian smiled and said, "You don't have confidence?" Tu Chen hesitated for a moment and said, "Young master, it's a bit difficult." Yi Xian smiled and said, 10 years in this world is 1 day in the outside world. I'll give you 1 month, which is 900 years. Is that enough, 900 years? Yi Xian said again, "In these 900 years, I'll satisfy any cultivation resources you need." There's time and cultivation resources. Tu Chen immediately said, "Sure." The four gods nodded one after another. At this moment, they were a little excited. Opportunity. The Xiao Ta in front of them was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for them. Originally, it was not impossible for them to attain the Sacred Heart Realm. After all, to be able to reach this point, their talents were naturally not weak. What did they lack? It was time and cultivation resources. But now, Yi Xian was giving them cultivation time and resources. After making arrangements for everyone, Yi Xian left Xiao Ta. He did not continue cultivating because it was very difficult for him to improve after attaining the Sacred Heart Realm. Moreover, he also wanted to settle down. Yi Xian strolled leisurely in the profound world. After a while, he came to a forest. In the bamboo forest, Yi Xian walked slowly. Around him, leaves fell from time to time. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly closed his eyes slowly. Calm the mind. Calm the mind and all things are clear. Focus the mind. Clear the world. After a long time, Yi Xian opened his palm and the green profound sword suddenly appeared in his hand. He suddenly stabbed forward lightly. The sword pierced the leaf. In an instant, the leaf withered at a speed visible to the naked eye. Just as it was about to completely turn into ashes, a strange scene suddenly appeared. The leaf suddenly returned to normal, as if it was returning to its youth. Not only that, after the leaf returned to normal, it began to grow roots. Then, the roots grew bigger and bigger. After a while, a decimal number appeared in his hand. However, it was not over yet. Not long after, the small tree grew bigger and bigger. In the end, an ancient tree that was several zhang tall appeared in front of Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the ancient tree in front of him. He was silent. Reverse. He'd first utilized the energy of the passage of time to cause the leaf to pass swiftly, and then he'd utilized the energy of reverse time to reverse the leaf. However, it was different this time. He wasn't reversing the future, he was reversing the past. What was reverse future? Reverse future was to slash the future with a single strike of the sword. When he drew his sword at this moment, the future would appear. What was reverse past? It was to recreate the scenes that had passed in the past. Time flowed by. What was the passage of time? The past was a manifestation of the passage of time. When time could be traced, then it could be controlled. Just like space in the past. Those with weak strength probably didn't even know what space was, let alone sense it. However, those with great strength couldn't just tear space apart at will, they could even leap through space. Anything that could be traced could be controlled, including time. Some experts in the past were able to reverse time, but it was extremely short. For example, they could make one's time slightly slower than their opponents. Actually, this was heaven-defying as well. However, as his strength increased, he noticed that such an ability wasn't very threatening to some formidable experts. Because if one could reverse time for a short while, then so could their opponent. However, the reverse he'd just executed was completely different from the reverse of those experts. What was the source of a leaf? Naturally, it was a tree. If a sword could slash the future, why couldn't it slash the past? Slash it. Thinking of this, Yi Xian's right hand suddenly began to exert force. How could he slash it? Slash the opponent's past with one sword. At first glance, it sounded very mysterious. If a person's past was slashed, then would that person's present still exist? Yi Xian fell silent. He noticed that his head was suddenly aching. A moment later, Yi Xian suddenly looked at the ancient tree in front of him. In the next moment, he slowly closed his eyes. In an instant, the space-time in front of him directly distorted. After a long time, Yi Xian's entire body became illusory. Then, the space-time in which he was in began to abstract, like rippling water. After a few breaths, Yi Xian returned to a quarter of an hour ago. Forcefully reverse. At this moment, the ancient tree in front of him was just a leaf. Yi Xian slashed with his sword. Chi. The leaf was directly annihilated. In the next moment, Yi Xian's pupils suddenly shrank. He noticed that his body and soul were actually disappearing bit by bit. Yi Xian's heart was filled with shock. What happened? Yi Xian did not have time to think too much. He quickly used the green profound sword to return to the present. When he returned to the present, Yi Xian discovered that his body and soul were illusory. Not only that, he also discovered that he did not seem to be in this space-time. Could it be that he had not returned from the past? Yi Xian's heart was filled with shock. What was going on? At this moment, Xiao Ta suddenly chuckled. Young master, who asked you to play around with time? Now you're confused, aren't you? Yi Xian said in a low voice. Xiao Ta, do you know what my current situation is? Xiao Ta said, I don't know. Yi Xian, at this moment, Yi Xian's expression suddenly changed. Because he discovered that his body and soul seemed to be disappearing. Yi Xian's heart was filled with shock. He quickly opened his right hand. Xiao Hun, suppress me. As soon as he finished speaking, the green profound sword merged with him. Bang! When the green profound sword merged with him, Yi Xian discovered that his body and soul that seemed to be disappearing were slowly returning to normal. Seeing this, Yi Xian instantly heaved a sigh of relief. However, he discovered that the world around him was not right. He was still not in the original space-time. In other words, he had not returned to the time before he returned to the future. Right now, he was still in a strange space-time phase. The future? Or the past? Yi Xian was stunned. He felt that he had played with himself until he was crippled. What was going on? At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm. Xiao Ta appeared in his hand, and Xiao Ta also became illusory. F***ck. Xiao Ta suddenly jumped up. F***ck. That's impossible. I am the number one tower in the heavens and realms. How could I disappear? Yi Xian looked at Xiao Ta in front of him. Xiao Ta was disappearing at a very terrifying speed. It was not the flow of time. He couldn't tell what kind of power it was. However, he carefully discovered that although Xiao Ta was disappearing, Aria's horn was not disappearing. However, Aria's horn was also undergoing a subtle change. It seemed to be fading. What was going on? Yi Xian was stunned. At this moment, Xiao Ta suddenly said in a trembling voice, Young lord, quickly take me back. Yi Xian said indifferently, Didn't you say that you are the number one tower in the heavens and realms? Don't be afraid. Xiao Ta was a little panicked. Young lord, if you don't take me back, Tu Chen and the others in the tower will all die. Hearing this, Yi Xian quickly took Xiao Ta back into his body. At this moment, Little Soul suddenly said in a trembling voice, Young lord, I am also disappearing. Yi Xian's pupils suddenly shrank. He discovered that the green profound sword was also disappearing. Yi Xian's face turned pale. F***ck. I've gone too far. At this moment, a sword that appeared out of nowhere suddenly fell in front of Yi Xian. The next moment, the time and space around Yi Xian trembled violently. Walking sword. The walking sword suddenly slashed lightly. Chi. Yi Xian suddenly heard a tearing sound as if something was torn apart. At this moment, an extremely terrifying voice suddenly came from all around. Who dares to tear the barrier of time and reverse time? Are you tired of living? F***ck. So it's the Destiny Boss. The Time Master greets the Destiny Boss. Destiny Boss, I kowtow to you. Thump. The sound of kowtowing echoed in the endless universe. P.S. Monthly ticket? F***ck, I kowtow to you. Chapter 2149. Kowtow. Yi Xian was struck dumb by the sound of the kowtow. What the hell? At that moment, the walking sword suddenly floated in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then held the walking sword. The next moment, he felt the world before him shatter, then the world returned to normal. Yi Xian looked around, and his eyes were a little dazed. It was still the same bamboo forest, but he had a feeling that it was a lifetime ago. In front of him, the ancient tree from before was gone. What the hell happened? Yi Xian looked at the walking sword in his hand and said softly, "Qinger." At this moment, the space in front of Yi Xian suddenly trembled slightly. In the next moment, a beam of white light landed in front of Yi Xian. An old man could be vaguely seen in that beam of white light. However, Yi Xian could not see his appearance clearly. But he could see that the old man was kneeling. "Time Master?" Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then said, "Senior?" Time Master hurriedly said, "You flatter me. You flatter me." Yi Xian was speechless. Time Master hesitated for a moment, then said, "Young Master Yi, how did you enter the River of Time?" Yi Xian frowned slightly. "River of Time?" Time Master glanced at Yi Xian, a little cautious. "You don't know?" Yi Xian shook his head. "I don't know." Time Master hesitated for a moment, then said, "Young Master Yi, are you at Sacred Heart State now?" Yi Xian nodded, "Yes." Time Master frowned slightly, a flash of doubt in his eyes. How can Sacred Heart State enter the River of Time, and reverse time? Then, he suddenly looked at the green profound sword in Yi Xian's hand. When he saw the green profound sword, he understood everything. Young Master Yi cheated to enter the River of Time. Time Master was speechless at that thought. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly asked, "Senior, can you introduce me to?" The Time Lord suddenly said with a trembling voice, "Young Master Yi, please don't call me Senior. I'm afraid of death." Yi Xian was speechless. "Then what should I call you?" The Time Lord hesitated for a moment and said, "Just call me Gongfu." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "Gongfu, can you tell me what happened to me just now?" After a moment of silence, the Time Lord said, "Young Master Leaf, time is like a long river. That river is divided into the past, the present, and the future. You just went back to the past. If you just went back to the past, it wouldn't be a big problem. But after going back to the past, you changed the future. Doing that is equivalent to breaking the magical laws of time, and breaking the magical laws of time will cause you to suffer the backlash of time. You were trapped in the seamless world just now." Yi Xian frowned. "Seamless realm?" The Time Master nodded. "Not in the past, not in the future, not in the present. Those who are in the seamless world will be erased by time." Yi Xian glanced at the Time Lord and said, "Gongfu, do you want to stand up and talk?" The Time Lord hurriedly shook his head. No. I just like kneeling." Yi Xian was speechless. The Time Lord continued, "Young Master Leaf, with your current strength, you can't enter the River of Time and change time." Yi Xian said solemnly, "What realm do I need to be able to enter the River of Time and change time?" The Time Lord thought about it for a moment and said, "At least immortal." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "The immortal realm?" The Time Lord nodded. "Immortal body, immortal soul, and immortal will. Only those three immortals can enter the River of Time. However, they can't change time. In order to change time, one must be immortal. In other words, one's body, soul, and will must be immortal. Only then can one not fear the seamless world and travel freely between the past, present, and future." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression became solemn. "According to what you've said, if one can achieve immortal, wouldn't they be invincible?" The Time Lord nodded. "If one can achieve that, there are indeed few who can rival them in the world. However, to say that they are invincible is a bit too much." Yi Xian looked at the Time Lord and asked, "Even that isn't invincible?" The Time Lord smiled bitterly. "Of course." Yi Xian did not understand. "Why?" The Time Lord thought about it and said, "I am the Time Lord. I control the River of Time. Even if you achieve immortal, as long as I want, I can decide your life or death with a thought. Yi Xian said instinctively, so, you are invincible? No, no. The Time Lord panicked. I am not invincible. I really am not invincible. Young Master Yi, be careful with what you say. Be careful with what you say. Don't say the word invincible lightly. Something bad will happen. Yi Xian was speechless. The Time Master hesitated for a moment and said, no matter how strong you are, there's always someone stronger. I'm nothing, really. Yi Xian looked at the Time Lord and said, you are the Time Lord and you control time? The Time Lord nodded. Yes. Yi Xian blinked. For example, my realm is not high enough, but I want to enter the river of time. Is there any way? The Time Lord was in a difficult position. This, Yi Xian smiled. Is it difficult? The Time Lord nodded. It is difficult. Yi Xian suddenly looked at the walking sword in his hand and smiled. Since it is difficult, I will not force you. Having said that, he turned around and left. At that moment, the Time Lord suddenly asked, Yi. Young Master Yi, you and Destiny are, Yi Xian smiled. She is my sister. Sister. Hearing this, the Time Master was shocked and quickly said, Young Master Yi, I don't think the matter you just mentioned is too difficult. Yi Xian blinked. Not difficult? The Time Lord nodded. Yes. As he said that, he opened his palm and 2 words floated in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian glanced at it. The word was, time. The Lord of Time said, Young Master Leaf, these 2 characters contain my laws of time. Once they enter your body, all you have to do is activate them, and you'll be able to use them for a short period of time. In that state, even if you enter the seamless world, you won't be erased. However, young Master Yi, your body, soul, and will are not particularly strong. Therefore, after you use the power of time, you will not be able to maintain it for too long. Moreover, after using it, your body will be a little weak. As soon as the Time Lord finished, the 2 words turned into 2 rays of golden light and entered Yi Xian's body. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. After a while, he found that 2 words had appeared in his sea of knowledge. At that moment, the Time Lord said, Young Master Yi, your soul, body, and will are too weak. Remember not to stay in the river of time for too long. Yi Xian said in a low voice, if I attack and kill my opponent in the past, my opponent will be dead in the future. Am I right? The Time Lord nodded. Yes. However, there is a condition. Yi Xian asked, what condition? The Time Lord said, you can't change yourself in the past. You can go back to the past to kill people, but you cannot go back to change yourself. Yi Xian did not understand. Why? The Time Lord said, if you go back to the past and kill someone, you will reverse their time. This will not affect you. However, if you go back to the past and change yourself. Let me give you an example. If you go back to the past and kill your father, then the current you will be erased. Kill my father. Hearing this, Yi Xian hurriedly shook his head. No, no. I can't do such a thing. The Time Lord, Yi Xian said in a deep voice, I understand what you mean. If I go back to the past, I cannot change the people and things that are related to me. Otherwise, it will directly affect the current me, right? The Time Lord nodded. Yes. Moreover, young Master Yi, you must understand one thing. The past is the past. If you go back to the past, strictly speaking, it is already in the past. To us, it is something that happened in the past. In other words, the past and the present are all illusory. Do not think about living in the past. If you do, you will be erased by the current time laws. Yi Xian frowned. The present time laws? The Time Lord nodded. The past has the past time laws, the present has the present time laws, and the future has the future time laws. Of course, strictly speaking, they are all time laws. Just like you, the past you, the present you, the future you. They are all still you, just at different stages of you. Hearing this, Yi Xian understood. The Time Lord continued, also, in the river of time, the future cannot be easily explored. You can slash the future with your sword, but you cannot go to the future. Yi Xian did not understand. Why is that? The Time Lord smiled. The past and the present have already happened. They are certain, but the future has not happened. In other words, the future is uncertain. Moreover, the future is multifaceted. For example, a person can have thousands of lives in the future. As for which life it will be in the end, it depends on the choice that person makes now. Therefore, the future and the present are connected. There is a direct causal relationship. If you choose to go to the future, although you can go there, that future might not be the final future. At this point, his expression became somewhat solemn. Once you go to the future to do something that is not the final future, for example, if you decide to eat in 15 minutes now, but after you go to the future, you don't choose to eat. Then, your timeline will be messed up, and you will be forever lost in the future spacetime until you are erased by the great Tao of time. And the you in this spacetime will disappear because no one can appear in the present and the future at the same time, not even me. Yi Xian fell into deep thought. The Time Lord continued, we must be respectful towards the future. Yi Xian suddenly asked, can Qing'er travel to the future? The Time Lord was silent for a long time before he said, she should be playing with something more advanced. Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 2150. Yi Xian fell silent. He had to admit, he was shocked. Time. He had come into contact with the Tao of time in the past, but not much. The past. Now. The future. Yi Xian suddenly discovered that the Tao of time was more complex and profound than he had imagined. Recollecting his thoughts, Yi Xian looked at the Time Lord. Senior, you mentioned immortal physique, immortal soul, immortal will, and eternal immortality. Are these the realms above the Sacred Heart? The Time Lord nodded, yes. Yi Xian's curiosity was piqued. Who created these realms? The Time Lord smiled. There are no paths in this world, but as long as someone walks it, there will be a path. Yi Xian fell silent. Senior, only eternal immortals can enter the river of time and slash the past, am I right? The Time Lord shook his head. Even eternal immortals cannot do it. To enter the river of time and slash the past, one has to go against not only the past, but also the laws of time. Once you are discovered by the laws of time, they will erase you. Of course, some stronger experts will use some mystiques to conceal their aura, preventing the laws of time from discovering them. However, those who can do this are few and far between. Yi Xian blinked. Senior, will I be discovered? The Time Lord smiled. Young Master Yi, they are sneaking around, but you are out in the open. After all, I am the Time Lord, in charge of the laws of time. Yi Xian laughed heartily. Many thanks. He hurried to help the Time Lord up. Get up. With me here, Qing'er will not harm you. The Time Lord hesitated, then stood up. After standing up, he was still flustered. He glanced at the Tao walking sword, and seeing no reaction from it, he heaved a sigh of relief. Yi Xian smiled. Senior, I am now at the Sacred Heart realm. To reach the immortal physique realm, is there any cultivation method? The Time Master thought about it and took out a thick ancient book. Young Master Yi, this is the immortal tome. It was created by an immortal emperor. I think it's pretty good. It should be suitable for you. Yi Xian hurriedly put it away, and then he said, then I won't hold back. The Lord of Time smiled, and was just about to say something, when suddenly, he frowned and turned his head. Not far away, an old man slowly walked over. Yi Xian frowned when he saw the old man. This old man was the Saint Heart expert from the immortal Tao world. Beside the old man was a middle-aged man. The elder from the immortal Tao temple stood behind the middle-aged man with a respectful expression on his face. Yi Xian glanced at the man. Obviously, someone from the Dark Sword Immortal sect had arrived. The middle-aged man glanced at the Time Master beside Yi Xian, then looked at Yi Xian. Are you Yi Xian? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. The middle-aged man chuckled. I was extremely curious about you before I came. After all, there aren't many in this world who dare to disrespect my Dark Sword Immortal sect. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he moved closer to the Time Master. Senior, do you know of the Dark Sword Immortal sect? The Time Master shook his head. I haven't. Yi Xian blinked. Then are you afraid? The Time Master was speechless. He noticed that young Master Yi seemed to have misunderstood his strength. Meanwhile, the middle-aged man suddenly glanced at the Time Master. Yi Xian, is he your backer? The Time Master glanced coldly at the middle-aged man. Is young Master Yi's name something you can call? As soon as he finished speaking, the middle-aged man's figure suddenly became illusory. Not only that, but almost in an instant, the middle-aged man's entire body directly aged as if he was about to wither. They were stunned. Both the middle-aged man and the old man were stunned. What's going on? Yi Xian glanced at the Time Master, and he was extremely shocked. Time flowed by. This was the true flow of time. The Time Master was quite ferocious. The middle-aged man looked at the Time Master with astonishment. Who are you? The Time Master's face was expressionless. He flicked his sleeve, and the middle-aged man instantly transformed into a pile of dust and vanished. He'd been completely wiped out. The old man at the Saint Heart State looked at the Time Master with terror on his face, and his mind had gone blank. He instantly killed a Saint Heart State expert. How could that be possible? Yi Xian spoke abruptly. Senior, the Time Master hesitated for a moment before he said, Young Master Yi, I'm actually not that weak. All these years, I've only been beaten by a big shot from the Mandate of Heaven. He was being very tactful. Yi Xian asked instinctively. Senior, your strength is so terrifying, so why can't you defeat Qing? The Time Master fell silent for a long time before he said, I want to know as well. Yi Xian, the Time Master suddenly looked at the old man. The old man's face fell, and he turned to flee. He was very fast, and he vanished into the horizon in the blink of an eye. But a moment later, he mysteriously appeared in front of Yi Xian and the Time Master, and then his body gradually became illusory and transparent. The old man was horrified. How is this possible? The Time Master shook his head slightly. Ignorant. With that, the old man was completely wiped out. Yi Xian, the Time Master turned to look at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, I have to go. There are many things I need to deal with. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then said, Senior, I don't know when we can meet again. Do you want to leave me a greeting gift? The Time Master's expression froze. Yi Xian looked at the Time Master sincerely. The Time Master hesitated for a moment, and then opened his palm, and a token appeared in his hand. This is the Time Master token. With this token, if you meet the Time Messengers in the future, you can command them. The Time Master token. Yi Xian quickly put away the Time Master token, and then said, Thank you, Senior. The Time Master said in a low voice, Young Master Yi, remember, you can't stay in the river of time for too long with your current strength, especially if you want to go against time. It will consume a lot of energy, and your body hasn't reached the immortal realm yet. As for the future, don't go there yourself. Your sword can, because it was forged by Senior Destiny, so there won't be any accidents. But you can't, so remember. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Senior, I will remember your reminder. The Time Master smiled. Farewell, young Master Yi. With that, his body became illusory and was about to vanish. Yi Xian suddenly thought of something, and then asked, Senior, how do you know Qing? The Time Master's expression became unnatural, and he smiled sheepishly. It's a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. After saying that, he disappeared. Yi Xian looked around, but he couldn't sense the Time Master. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. From the Time Master's attitude toward Qing, he must have been taught a lesson by Qing, Otherwise, he wouldn't be so afraid of Qing, Without thinking too much, Yi Xian looked at the Time Master in his hand, and the corners of his mouth curled up. In the following time, Yi Xian continued to practice /lifespan, /future, and /past. With the word time given to him by the Time Master, he found that his control over the power of time flow and the power of time reversal had become more adept. Their power had also increased. Especially /past. /past was more terrifying than /future, and it was also more bizarre. Some of the stronger experts could still predict the future of /future. After all, some experts had the ability to predict fortune and misfortune. However, /past was different. It was /past. Something that had already happened. Unless the other party could return to the past like him. Only then would he be able to defend against it. But to return to the past, only eternal immortal realm experts could do it. To him, the Sacred Heart realm was nothing much. The only pity was that the Walking Dao sword had run away again. He wanted to keep the Walking Dao sword for research. At the crucial moment, he could use the Walking Dao sword to scare others. 10 days later. Yi Xian, who was cultivating, suddenly left Xiao Ta. As soon as he left Xiao Ta, he frowned. He raised his head and looked at the sky. The sky in the distance suddenly split open, and in the next moment, an extremely terrifying aura swept down from the crack. In an instant, the entire profound world was in an uproar. Countless experts in the profound world raised their heads to look at the sky, their eyes filled with doubt and shock. Was someone going to attack the profound world? At this moment, an old man slowly walked out from the crack in space. The old man wore a loose black robe and held an iron sword in his left hand. His expression was cold. Swordsman. Yi Xian looked at the old man calmly. The old man looked down at Yi Xian. You destroyed the immortal Dao sect? Yi Xian glanced at the sword in the old man's hand and nodded. The old man stared at Yi Xian. Did you know that the immortal Dao temple was a subsidiary force of my mystic sword immortal sect? Yi Xian shook his head. The old man narrowed his eyes. Didn't know? Yi Xian smiled. I didn't know at first, but I found out later. The old man stared at Yi Xian. You still dared to destroy it when you knew. Yi Xian smiled. When I, Yi Xian, do things, it doesn't matter if I dare or not, it only matters if I want to or not. I wanted to destroy it, so I destroyed it. Everyone was speechless. When the old man heard Yi Xian's words, he was so angry that he laughed. There's no such thing as 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 there's only, there's no such thing as there's no such thing as there's only, there's no such thing as there's no such thing as there's no such thing as there's only, there's no such thing as 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 there's only, there's no such thing as there's no such thing as there's no such thing as. There's no such thing as 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 there. As soon as he finished speaking, the iron sword in his hand suddenly slashed down from the sky, and it seemed like it could tear the world apart. It was extremely terrifying. Yi Xian's expression was calm as he allowed the sword to slash into his head. Bang! Everyone watched as the iron sword entered Yi Xian's body. In the next moment, a powerful aura swept out from within Yi Xian. He absorbed it. The old man was stunned by this scene. Yi Xian took a deep breath greedily, and then he gazed at the old man and grinned. May I ask if everyone in your mystic sword immortal sect cultivates the sword? The old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Yes. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment before he said, I slaughtered the immortal Dao temple. If your mystic sword immortal sect isn't satisfied, then feel free to take revenge. No matter how many come, I'm invincible. Do as you please. He paused for a moment before he continued, I'm serious this time. Chapter 2151. I'm invincible, you can do whatever you want. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the old man's expression became extremely ugly. Arrogant. Too arrogant. The old man stared at Yi Xian. Do you know what you're saying? Below, Yi Xian smiled slightly and turned to leave. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the distance. He left. The old man frowned slightly. He wanted to say something, but in the next moment, he seemed to sense something. His pupils suddenly shrank, and in the blink of an eye, his entire body became illusory. The old man looked at Yi Xian in horror and said with a trembling voice, What did you do to me? Yi Xian looked at the old man and did not say anything. Over. In that instant, he had gone to the future to kill the other party. When he used the future for the first time, he found its biggest weakness and biggest advantage. What weakness? That was, the future could not be used on people who were too much stronger than him. Because he could not kill the other party now, he could not kill the other party even if he went back to the past not too long ago. With his current strength, he could not go back too far in the past. Otherwise, he could go back tens of millions of years ago. Now, he could only go back to a month ago at most. After that, his body would not be able to support it. 1 month was not very useful, because if he could not beat the other party now, he might not be able to beat the other party a month ago. In the past, it was not that the other party could not fight back. Of course, the advantage was that it was unexpected. It was more mysterious than the future, and the other party could not predict it at all. Moreover, he also found the most terrifying thing. When fighting with others, he could go back to the past, and him who went back to the past knew what the other party was going to do next. It was like cheating. Not only that, he also found that when he went to kill the other party from the long river of the world, the other party was completely dumbfounded. Because there was also a him in the past, the other party was not on guard against the him in the future. In other words, the him in the present could cooperate with the him in the past. Two people working together. However, he had to discuss it with his future self first. For example, right now, he could confirm that he would attack in 15 minutes, and then he could attack immediately, and 15 minutes later, when he thought up to here, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes, and then he suddenly stabbed with his sword. A strand of sword light suddenly pierced through the space between the old man's brows. At practically the exact same moment, another strand of sword light appeared out of nowhere and directly pierced through the old man's brows. There were 2 sword lights between the old man's eyebrows. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian immediately became excited. It really worked. He was cooperating perfectly with his future self. Right at this moment, Yi Xian's body suddenly became illusory. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically when he saw this. Damn it. The time laws are trying to erase me. Yi Xian hurriedly activated the 2 words that the Time Master had given him. As the 2 words were activated, his body gradually returned to normal. Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed like his actions were truly too heaven-defying, so the time laws didn't allow such a thing to happen. Fortunately, the Time Master had opened a back door for him. Fortunately, he had the green profound sword. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to accomplish this at all. Needless to say, Yi Xian was very excited at this moment. This slash of the past was many times more terrifying than slash of the future. So long as he didn't encounter an expert that was too monstrous, then his slash of the past was practically invincible. Meanwhile, the old man in the distance spoke with a trembling voice, how did you do it? Yi Xian glanced at the old man. Do you want to know? The old man nodded. Yes. Yi Xian grinned. I won't tell you. Pooh. The old man spat out a mouthful of blood and died on the spot. After the old man died, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. At this moment, he suddenly realized how terrifying the Time Dao was. Once someone mastered this Time Dao, it was truly too heaven-defying. Collecting his thoughts, Yi Xian returned to Xiao Ta. Then, he took out the Immortal Tome. Although he hadn't reached the Eternal Immortal Realm, he could do things that the Eternal Immortal Realm couldn't. It could be said that he had skipped several major realms. Actually, he didn't need to cultivate realms. In fact, he wasn't cultivating realms. He was studying the Immortal Tome to improve his divine soul, body, and will. The improvement of these three aspects would determine how long he could stay in the river of time. His ultimate goal was the Time Dao. In short, he was cultivating four aspects: Sword Dao, divine soul, body, and will. Immortal body. Yi Xian began to cultivate his body first. What was immortal? It was eternal, indestructible, and everlasting. When he chose to cultivate the immortal body, he found an awkward problem. Star vein. No, it was the star god vein. It was a spiritual vein that surpassed the star vein. The purity of the star god vein was more than 10 times that of an ordinary star vein. Only such a pure spiritual energy star vein could allow his body to undergo a qualitative change. Moreover, one star god vein wasn't enough. He had to prepare at least 100. Besides that, he needed many treasures of heaven and earth that he hadn't even heard of. For example, the immortal fruit, the spirit of heaven and earth. Yi Xian felt a headache coming on. Damn it. Cultivation wasn't just a competition of talent, it was also a competition of money. Most of the time, money was even more important than talent. No money? Cultivate my ass. Just like this moment. Without the star god vein, he, the number one genius of all time, could only watch helplessly. Earn money. Yi Xian sighed softly, and then he left Xiao Ta. He opened his palm, and a spatial ring appeared in his hand. It was the spatial ring of the old man from the Mystic Sword Immortal sect. There were only star veins in the spatial ring, but no star god veins. Yi Xian's headache grew even worse when he saw this. Because it meant that he might not be able to come into contact with the star god vein. The Immortal Treasure Pavilion? Yi Xian shook his head. He didn't really want to go look for the Southern Envoy. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly raised his head and looked over. A middle-aged man was walking over slowly from the horizon. Yi Xian's expression was calm. Needless to say, it was definitely from the Mystic Sword Immortal sect. The middle-aged man suddenly appeared before Yi Xian, and he gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian's expression was calm. The middle-aged man grinned. Young Master Yi, my name is Xiao Ming, and I'm the Grand Elder of the Mystic Sword Immortal sect. Yi Xian said with a smile, are you here alone? The middle-aged man nodded. Young Master Yi, don't worry. I came alone, Yi Xian suddenly interrupted the middle-aged man. You misunderstood me. I meant that you can call more people over. The smile on the middle-aged man's face instantly vanished when he heard this, and he gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian's expression was calm and extremely composed. At this moment, the middle-aged man's heart suddenly sank. Yi Xian smiled, Sir, you can call more people over now. Xiao Ming hesitated for a moment before he said, Young Master Yi, I'm here to reason with you. Reason with me. Yi Xian frowned slightly. What reason? Don't. I first killed your subsidiary Immortal Daoist Temple, and then I killed numerous members of your Mystic Sword Immortal sect. I'm obviously not giving your Mystic Sword Immortal sect any face. Moreover, I'm looking down on your Mystic Sword Immortal sect. How can you tolerate this? Don't tolerate it. Hurry up and call more people over to deal with me. Call as many as you can. It's best if you summon your ancestors. The middle-aged man was dumbstruck. What the fuck? What kind of trick is this? Yi Xian's expression turned cold. Are you sure you won't call more people over? Xiao Ming hurriedly said, young Master Yi, I'm here to reason with you. Reason with me. We're all civilized people. How can we do such a barbaric thing? Don't you think so? Yi Xian said in a deep voice, I slaughtered your subsidiary immortal Daoist temple. Xiao Ming said immediately, it was the immortal Daoist temple that offended young Master Yi first. They deserved it. Yi Xian continued, I killed 2 Sacred Heart experts of your Mystic Sword Immortal sect. Xiao Ming suddenly said, that was a spar. A spar. Young Master Yi sparred with 2 of our experts, and then you accidentally killed them. Accidents are inevitable in a spar. We understand, we understand. Yi Xian was speechless. Damn it. How can you understand that? He wasn't used to this sudden change of routine. At this time, Xiao Ming continued, young Master Yi, I'm here with sincerity and friendship. Although we had some misunderstandings before, I believe those misunderstandings will vanish under our friendly communication. Then, he paused and said, in this world, everything can disappear, but not justice and order. Yi Xian was speechless. Xiao Ming glanced at Yi Xian. He hesitated for a while and then said, young Master Yi, I wonder who your teacher is. Obviously, he wanted to inquire about Yi Xian's background. Yi Xian said with a smile, Elder Xiao, I, Yi Xian, don't have any backing, really. Xiao Ming smiled and said in his heart, I don't believe you. Yi Xian said again, Elder Xiao, are you sure you won't call more people to beat me up? Xiao Ming shook his head quickly. No, no. Young Master Yi, I just said that I'm here to clear up the misunderstanding. Yi Xian thought for a while and then said, do you have star god meridians? Hearing this, Xiao Ming's pupils suddenly constricted. Yi. Young Master Yi, you know about star god meridians. Star god meridians. Xiao Ming had to admit that he was very shocked at this moment. Because even some old monsters of Mystic Sword Immortal sect didn't know about the existence of star god meridians. Because it was too precious. And he only knew about star god meridians because of his position. Star god meridians were necessary to achieve the legendary immortal body. Could it be that young Master Yi has an immortal body realm expert behind him? Thinking of this, Xiao Ming broke out in a cold sweat. Yi Xian suddenly asked again, young Master Xiao, do you have one? Xiao Ming looked at Yi Xian. He hesitated for a while and then said, no. No. Yi Xian thought for a while and then said, then do you know where I can find one? I'll go grab some. Oh, no, I'll go borrow some. Xiao Ming's expression froze. Chapter 2152. Xiao Ming's expression was quite unsightly when he heard Yi Xian. Rob? Fortunately, I didn't mention that the Dark Sword Immortal sect has a divine star range. Otherwise, Yi Xian would have probably gone straight to the Dark Sword Immortal sect. Arrogant? He didn't think that Yi Xian was arrogant. Yi Xian had killed 2 Saint Heart experts of the Dark Sword Immortal sect. Moreover, they'd been instantly killed. Moreover, Yi Xian hadn't shown any fear towards the Dark Sword Immortal sect since the beginning. What did that mean? It meant that Yi Xian wasn't afraid of the Dark Sword Immortal sect at all. There was someone behind him. How could he be so arrogant without that person? Meanwhile, Yi Xian spoke abruptly, Elder Xiao, does your Dark Sword Immortal sect really not have a divine star range? Don't worry, I, Yi Xian, am not a bandit. I'm just asking. Elder Xiao shook his head repeatedly, no. We really don't. How could my Dark Sword Immortal sect possibly have such a divine treasure? Yi Xian spoke seriously, I really don't. Elder Xiao spoke seriously as well, young Master Yi, we really don't have one. Yi Xian was speechless. Why is he like that? It's like I'm a bandit. As if he'd thought of something, Yi Xian asked, Elder Xiao, what's the cultivation of your sect master? His body is immortal? Or his soul? Elder Xiao glanced at Yi Xian and said, his body is immortal. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Only his body is immortal? Only? Elder Zhao's face froze. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, your sect master is only at the immortal realm, yet your dark sword immortal sect dares to act so arrogantly? Aren't you afraid of bringing calamity upon yourself? Elder Zhao hesitated for a short while before he said, young Master Yi, is his body at the immortal realm very weak? Yi Xian replied with a question, isn't it weak? Elder Zhao glanced at Yi Xian, I wonder what cultivation realm young Master Yi is at. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. I'm no longer in the realm. Hearing this, Elder Zhao frowned, not in the realm? Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he said, I'm an outsider, and you're insiders. Understand? Elder Zhao, Yi Xian suddenly said, Elder Zhao, how about you take me to your dark sword immortal sect? Elder Zhao looked at Yi Xian warily. Young Master Yi, what are you trying to do? Yi Xian said with a smile, I will personally go and have a chat with your sect leader. Elder Zhao hesitated for a moment before he said, what do you want to talk about? Yi Xian walked over to Elder Zhao and said with a smile, Elder Zhao, you can't represent your profound sword immortal sect. I'm going to your profound sword immortal sect because I want to have a talk with your sect master. If the talk goes well, then we can all get along peacefully. If not, then I'll annihilate your profound sword immortal sect. Elder Zhao, Yi Xian said with a smile, let's go. Xiao Ming fell silent for a long time, and then he brought Yi Xian with him as he turned around and vanished into the horizon. Xiao Ming remained silent all along the way. Just as Yi Xian had said, he really couldn't represent the entire profound sword immortal sect. If they wanted to get along peacefully, then Yi Xian had to talk to the sect master of the profound sword immortal sect. Before long, Yi Xian and Elder Zhao arrived at a world. The chaotic world. After entering the chaotic world, Yi Xian immediately frowned. He'd come to this place when he'd just attained the Sacred Heart state. The profound sword immortal sect was in the chaotic world. Obviously, the profound sword immortal sect had occupied the resources of this world. Before long, Xiao Ming and Yi Xian stopped. Not far away from them were hundreds of floating halls, and every single one of them was majestic and extremely luxurious. Not far away from them was a huge sword that hung upside down. The huge sword was hundreds of meters long, and it stood towering in the sky. It was extremely domineering. The profound sword immortal sect. Xiao Ming turned to look at Yi Xian, young Master Yi, please. Please. Yi Xian nodded slightly, and then he followed Xiao Ming towards the distance. Along the way, Yi Xian noticed that swordsmen flew by on swords from time to time. The weakest of these swordsmen was actually at the Sacred Heart state. The weakest was at the Sacred Heart state. Moreover, there were quite a few of them. At this moment, he suddenly understood why the profound sword immortal sect was so arrogant. They're really strong. A thought suddenly arose in Yi Xian's mind. There are so many powerful swordsmen in the profound sword immortal sect. If they attack me together, does that mean I don't need to use the star god meridian? When he thought of this, Yi Xian was instantly excited. I can give it a try. At this moment, Xiao Ming suddenly stopped. A middle-aged man appeared not far away from him. The middle-aged man wore a black robe and carried a sword on his back. Xiao Ming bowed slightly, sect master. He was the sect master of the profound sword immortal sect, Xiansong. Meanwhile, a few dozen swordsmen suddenly appeared in the surroundings. All of them were at the Sacred Heart state. Xiansong gazed at Yi Xian and remained silent. Yi Xian grinned, all of you attack me together. Attack me together. As soon as these words were spoken, an uproar arose. Damn it. Attack me together? The swordsmen were infuriated. Meanwhile, one of the swordsmen suddenly charged forward and slashed his sword at Yi Xian. All of them were swordsmen, so how arrogant were they? How could they endure Yi Xian's disdain? Yi Xian didn't dodge, and he just allowed the sword to slash at Yi Xian's head. Bang! As soon as the sword came into contact with Yi Xian's head, it was instantly absorbed. All the swordsmen were stunned when they witnessed this scene. As for Xian, he frowned slightly. Yi Xian looked at the dumbfounded swordsman in front of him. That's it? That's it. The swordsman was enraged when he heard this. How dare you? As soon as his voice fell, he suddenly opened his palm. The next moment, a sword light suddenly slashed down from the sky. It was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, it arrived above Yi Xian's head. Wherever this sword light passed, time and space were directly set ablaze. It was extremely terrifying. Yi Xian still didn't dodge, and he just let the sword light slash at him. Bang! Under the swordsman's gaze, the sword light directly entered Yi Xian's body, and then it was completely absorbed by him. All the swordsmen were petrified on the spot. In front of Yi Xian, the old man looked at Yi Xian in horror. Yi Xian glanced at the old man. That's it? The old man was speechless. Yi Xian suddenly glanced at the swordsman, and his expression was calm. I have no intention of targeting all of you. However, the Dark Sword Immortal sect only has this much? Just this much? The expressions of the swordsman instantly turned unsightly. Yi Xian suddenly said, there's no need for all of you to continue watching. Attack together. Attack together. As soon as these words were spoken, how could the swordsman endure it? They were about to attack when Xian suddenly said, stop. The swordsmen hesitated for a moment when they heard Xian, but they didn't choose to attack in the end. Xian gazed at Yi Xian. Young Master Ye's physique is very special. Yi Xian walked slowly towards Xian. You have two choices. The first is to kill me, and the second is to slaughter your Dark Sword Immortal sect. Make your choice. If you choose the first, then you can summon your ancestor right now. I have no intention of targeting all of you, but to be honest, all of you are trash in my eyes. Trash. How presumptuous. In the distance, a swordsman at the Saint Heart realm was truly unable to endure it any longer, and he was about to attack. But in the next moment, he seemed to have sensed something, and his pupils constricted. A sword had suddenly pierced his throat. Hiss. A strand of blood sprayed from his throat. Future severing. Presently, he was even more skilled at future severing. With a single slash, he could kill an enemy at any time in the next 3 days. The old man's sudden death caused the expressions of all the swordsmen here to change drastically. What's going on? He was instantly killed. At this moment, the expressions of all the swordsmen here had become solemn, and there was even fear in them. The sword on Xian back that stood before Yi Xian was trembling slightly. At this moment, Xian was shocked as well. Because he wasn't able to see through Yi Xian's cultivation at all. Yi Xian looked Xian in the eyes. 3 breaths of time. If you don't give me a satisfactory answer in 3 breaths of time, then I'll slaughter your sect. Slaughter the sect. Xian eyes narrowed slightly when he heard this. Since it's like that, then I'll seek guidance from young Master Yi. As he spoke, the sword on his back suddenly flew out, and then it slashed directly at Yi Xian. Yi Xian still didn't dodge. When he saw that Yi Xian didn't dodge, Xian pupils constricted, and he was about to retreat. But right at this moment, he seemed to have sensed something, and terror appeared in his eyes. At this moment, a sword suddenly stabbed into the back of his head. Hiss. Xian was instantly frozen in place by this strike. Future severing. Xian suddenly retreated. A ray of light flashed, and he'd retreated 30 kilometers away. After Xian stopped, he stared at Yi Xian. I have an eternal body. Your sword isn't able to injure me at all. He hadn't finished speaking when his body shattered into pieces, and his soul swiftly dispersed. Xian gazed at Yi Xian with terror. You. What sort of sword is that? Yi Xian's expression was calm. It's just an ordinary sword. However, because I'm formidable, it's formidable as well. Little Soul was speechless. Xian Tsang suddenly said, Young Master Yi, we can talk. Yi Xian shook his head. You've already fought to such an extent, so what's there to talk about? As he spoke, he opened his palm, and the green sword directly absorbed Xian Tsang's soul before returning to his grasp. The surroundings were deathly silent. The sect master of the Dark Sword Immortal sect is gone just like that? Elder Shao broke out in cold sweat. So this young Master Yi wasn't bragging, and he really is. Fortunately, I acted humbly just now. Otherwise, would have perished by now, right? Yi Xian glanced at the swordsman and said, At this moment, all of you have two choices. The first is to attack and avenge your sect master. The second is to submit to me. All of them fell silent. Yi Xian smiled, What? Do all of you think that I want all of you to submit to me? To be honest, all of you are a burden to me if you submit to me. Meanwhile, Elder Shao suddenly bowed respectfully, I'm willing to submit to young Master Yi. Yi Xian glanced at Elder Shao, and then he opened his palm, causing a ray of white light to suddenly enter the center of Elder Zhao's forehead. A short moment later, Elder Shao seemed to have obtained something, and he immediately knelt down and spoke with a trembling voice, Thank you, young Master Yi. What did I obtain? The sword cultivators at the side were stupefied. Yi Xian spoke indifferently, This is the first chapter of the eternal ceremony. So long as you have sufficient resources, then you can rely on it to attain the eternal body realm. Even if you don't have any resources, it can still improve your strength greatly. The eternal ceremony? The swordsmen were instantly quite excited when they heard this. Meanwhile, some of the swordsmen hurriedly bowed respectfully, We're willing to follow young Master Yi. Yi Xian suddenly turned to look at Elder Shao, Can the Dark Sword Immortal sect summon its ancestor? Elder Shao hesitated for a moment before he said, Yes. Our ancestor once left a strand of his soul behind. Yi Xian nodded slightly, Summon the ancestor. Elder Shao was slightly stunned, and then he said, Why? Yi Xian smiled, I want to fight him and see if he can resist a single attack of my sword. Elder Shao hesitated for a moment before he said, Young Master Yi, I heard that our ancestor's strength is very formidable. Yi Xian grinned, and it was a very composed smile. If he attacks twice, then I, Yi Xian, will stand upside down and have diarrhea. All of them were speechless. Elder Shao thought for a moment, and then he turned around and left. It didn't take long for a ray of light to suddenly shoot into the sky from within the Dark Sword Immortal sect, and then a swordsman suddenly appeared within it. It was a swordsman in a green robe. Yi Xian's face instantly froze when he saw the swordsman. The experts of the Dark Sword Immortal sect were stunned when they saw the swordsman. Why is this swordsman so similar to young Master Yi? P.S. Let me recommend a book to all of you. It's much better than The Only Sword. It's called Invincible Sword Domain, and you'll be able to find it right away. The reason I've been updating so slowly lately is because I've been reading this book. I've been so engrossed in it that I've forgotten to eat and sleep. Chapter 2153. Father. At this moment, Yi Xian was stunned. Damn it. The ancestor of the Profound Sword Immortal sect is my father? We fought for so long, yet he's actually on our side? In the sky, the azure-robed man looked down at Yi Xian and said with a smile, I heard everything you said just now. Stand upside down and have diarrhea. TSK, TSK. That would definitely be a sight to behold. Yi Xian was speechless. The experts of the Profound Sword Immortal sect hurriedly bowed, Greetings, ancestor. The green-clothed man glanced at them with a calm expression, I'm not considered to be your founding ancestor. All of them were speechless. Yi Xian gazed at the green-clothed man, Father. What's your relationship with the Profound Sword Immortal sect? The green-clothed man smiled, I gave them some pointers all those years ago. So that's why. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. We fought for so long, yet he's actually on our side. The green-clothed man glanced at Yi Xian. You've come into contact with the Tao of Time? Yi Xian nodded. The green-clothed man roared with laughter. You've improved quite quickly. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he asked, how far away are we? The green-clothed man blinked. It's not very far. It's just a little bit away. A little bit. Yi Xian instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this, and he smiled. I'll work hard. The green-clothed man nodded. Just work hard. Yi Xian was quite curious. Father, what are you and Big Brother doing right now? The green-clothed man smiled. We're going around. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, Father, you have to be careful. I haven't even fulfilled my filial duties, so you have to be careful. The green-clothed man roared with laughter. Don't worry. So long as I don't want to die, then no one in this world can kill me. You, on the other hand, have to be careful. Don't make me have to send my son off one day. All of them had strange expressions on their faces. They were father and son. However, this pair of father and son was kind and filial. Yi Xian said with smile, I have Qing, under normal circumstances, I won't die. The green-robed man said sternly, it's not good to rely on others. You should learn from your father. Your father killed his way out. Yi Xian was a little puzzled. Xiao Ta said that you were often hung up and beaten, and your soul was often ignited. You were in a very difficult situation. Xiao Ta suddenly jumped up, F***CK. Young master, the green-robed man narrowed his eyes. Yi Xian hurriedly added, it also said that you were beaten by Qing, before. Inside Yi Xian's body, Xiao Ta suddenly said in a trembling voice, Young lord, you idiot, you've made a big mistake. In the sky, the green-robed man suddenly opened his palm, and a wisp of sword light suddenly flew down. The target was Yi Xian. Yi Xian seemed to have expected this, and the corners of his mouth slightly raised. When he saw his father said that there was only a little distance between them. He wanted to fight with his father. He was not very confident in fighting with his father's real body, but he was confident in fighting with his father's avatar. Today, he, Yi Xian, was going to kill his father. Facing the green-robed man, even if it was just a small avatar, Yi Xian did not dare to have the slightest bit of carelessness. His first move was a direct slash. Not only that, at this moment, he also made a move, letting his future self slash the past, two working together. His strongest sword. When this sword slashed out, the corners of Yi Xian's mouth slightly raised. This was because he realized that the green-robed man did not seem to expect that his future self had already made a move. He did not defend against the green-robed man's sword. In his opinion, his father's avatar should not be able to break through his invincible sword body. His sword body should be able to defend against this sword. Take it head on. An injury in exchange for a life. Almost at the same time, Xiao Ta suddenly charged out of Yi Xian's body and directly collided with the green-robed man's avatar. The man and the tower had discussed it. In the sky, Xiao Ta laughed, I have been a tower for tens of thousands of years. Today, I, Xiao Ta, will defy the heavens and change my fate. Master, from now on, don't call me Xiao Ta, please call me Tower Master. The green-robed man looked at Xiao Ta who was colliding with him, and his expression was calm. Below, the green-robed man's sword energy suddenly pierced between Yi Xian's eyebrows. Bang! Yi Xian's body shook violently, and then it directly turned into ashes. At the same time, his soul was instantly slashed hundreds of thousands of meters away, and as soon as he stopped, he fell directly into a boundless abyss. Yi Xian's head was buzzing. He did not resist it. My invincible sword body did not resist it. Yi Xian hurriedly looked at the green-robed man in the distance. At the end of his vision, his sword had already slashed in front of the green-robed man, but his green profound sword was directly caught by two fingers of the green-robed man. And that sword of his in the future did not appear from the beginning to the end. What's going on? Just as this doubt appeared in Yi Xian's mind, the next moment, he felt that his soul directly became illusory. What's going on? Yi Xian was dumbfounded. In the distance, just as Xiao Ta collided in front of the green-robed man, the green-robed man in the distance pointed with his fingers. Bang! Xiao Ta shook violently, and the body of the tower directly cracked. Then, followed by an extremely mournful cry, Xiao Ta directly flew out of sight. The green-robed man looked at the green profound sword in front of him, and the green profound sword trembled. I was forced. The green-robed man smiled slightly, and then released his fingers. Little Soul hurriedly flew in front of Yi Xian, and said in a trembling voice, "Young master, it seems that we can't beat him." Yi Xian, the green-robed man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian, and he looked at Yi Xian, and said with a smile, "Is it fun?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly, "Father, how did you defend against that slash of mine in the past?" The green-robed man shook his head, "You fool." Yi Xian, the green-robed man said again, "To be precise, it is the future you who slashed the past. You let the future you slash the past, and then at this moment you do it. I have to say, this idea of yours is quite unique, and indeed, quite good. Unfortunately, you have overlooked one thing." Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "What?" The green-robed man said, "Strength. You have underestimated your father's strength. To put it simply, the Tao of Time can't do anything to your father. Not to mention you, even the Time Master would have to kneel in front of your father." Yi Xian, the green-robed man said again, "However, your sword just now is indeed quite good. Now that you are working with your future self, this sword can kill people who are several realms higher than you." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Father, do you think there is anything that needs to be improved on?" The green-robed man blinked, "Think about it yourself." Yi Xian's face darkened immediately. "Damn it. This is my biological father?" Biological father. The green-robed man patted Yi Xian's shoulder lightly, "Don't be unfair. What you comprehend yourself is the best. It's like cutting flesh with a knife. Others tell you that cutting flesh with a knife will hurt, but if you don't cut yourself, you won't know what pain feels like." Yi Xian glanced at the green-robed man, "Father, are you fooling me?" The green-robed man, Yi Xian asked again, "What is above the Tao of Time?" The green-robed man smiled and said, "Let's play with time first." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Father, you only cultivate the sword, right?" The green-robed man nodded. Yi Xian was silent. The green-robed man smiled slightly, "I know what you are thinking. You are afraid that your cultivation is too mixed and it will affect the Tao of Sword, right?" Yi Xian nodded. The green-robed man smiled and said, "Don't think that way. Everyone's life is different. Just like you and me, although we both have the crazy demon bloodline, your crazy demon bloodline is different from mine." "Do you know why?" Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "Why?" Actually, he had wanted to ask this question for a long time. The green-robed man said in a low voice, "Personality. Our personalities are different. Therefore, although we have the same bloodline, we are different. Including the Tao of Sword. Father didn't teach you the Tao of Sword because you already have your own Tao of Sword. You are not suitable to walk our path." Yi Xian frowned slightly, "My own Tao of Sword?" The green-robed man smiled and said, "Haven't you noticed? Your Tao of Sword is different from our Tao of Sword." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, "What Tao of Sword?" The green-robed man blinked, "Shameless." Yi Xian's face instantly darkened. The green-robed man said, "I am not teasing you. A thick-skinned person is broad-minded. A broad-minded person's sword is broad-minded. There are millions of Tao of Sword in the world. There is no need for you to learn other people's Tao of Sword. Walk your own path. Understand?" Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Father, are you serious?" The green-robed man laughed. You are my son. Why would I lie to you? Yi Xian was skeptical. The green-robed man said, I know a place where you can train your Tao of sword. Are you interested in going? Yi Xian was slightly curious. What place? The green-robed man smiled and said, the burial god territory. I passed by that place in the past. That place is quite suitable for you. At this moment, Xiao Ta's voice suddenly sounded out from the horizon, young master, don't go. If you go, you will probably become a little brother. Don't you want to continue acting cool here? Don't you want to be invincible? Yi Xian instantly hesitated when he heard this. Should I stay here for a while longer? The green-robed man smiled and said, what? Are you afraid? Yi Xian smiled embarrassedly. I am naturally not afraid. I mainly want to develop for a while longer. The green-robed man smiled and said, that is not a bad idea. However, you should know that only by fighting can you improve yourself. Right now, your strength has already reached the peak of this universe. If you continue to stay here, you will only be a weakling. Do you think this is interesting? Yi Xian hurriedly nodded. Interesting. The green-robed man's expression froze. Yi Xian said seriously, Father, Xiao Ta and I have decided to stay here for a while longer. We are not going anywhere. The green-robed man looked at Yi Xian and the smile on his face suddenly disappeared. Are you going or not? Yi Xian's expression froze when he heard this. Damn. Damn. This father is going to use force? Chapter 2154. Yi Xian's expression darkened when he heard the green-robed man's words. My dad is going to send me away by force. Damn it. Why did I ask Xiao Ming to call me ancestor? Isn't this a trap of my own making? I'm such a pig head. At this moment, the green-robed man said, I think you should go and train yourself. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and then said, I think. The green-robed man suddenly shook his head. I don't want you to think. I want me to think. Yi Xian's face stiffened again, and he looked extremely ugly. The green-robed man blinked. Look at your expression. You don't seem convinced. If you don't like it, hit me. Kill this doppelganger of mine and you'll have the final say. Yi Xian, the green-robed man was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly said, I'll go. The green-robed man was slightly stunned, and then he smiled. Have you thought it through? Yi Xian nodded, yes. What's the point of being invincible in this place? I want to challenge. I want to challenge someone stronger than me. The green-robed man nodded, that's the right idea. Yi Xian suddenly said, but, Dad, can I go a few months later? The green-robed man looked at Yi Xian, no. Yi Xian quickly said, a few months later, I'll definitely go. The green-robed man smiled, don't say that to me, because I don't believe your nonsense. Don't play any tricks on me. These are all leftovers from me. Yi Xian, Xiao Ta suddenly said in a trembling voice, Master, we're not invincible enough. The green-robed man looked at Xiao Ta expressionlessly, should I call you Tower Master? Xiao Ta, the green-robed man smiled, Xiao Ta, after you followed this guy, I found that your character has changed a lot. Xiao Ta hesitated for a moment before he said, one is marked by the company one keeps. Yi Xian was speechless. The green-robed man shook his head. Xiao Ta, do you want to come with me? Yi Xian's expression instantly changed when he heard this. This Xiao Ta was his cultivation artifact. He was just about to speak when beside him, Xiao Ta suddenly said, Master, I'd better follow the young master. Young master is still young. If he goes out alone, you will definitely be worried. If I follow him, I can at least take care of him. Yi Xian was touched when he heard this. At this critical moment, Xiao Ta was still very kind. Actually, Xiao Ta had his own plans. If he followed Yi Xian, he would continue to be modified by heaven's will. The green-robed man nodded slightly. Then follow him. As he spoke, he gazed at Yi Xian. 3 days. You must head to Heaven Burial Domain in 3 days. This isn't for you to show off. Your older sister seems to have caused some trouble there. Go deal with it for her. Yang Nianxue. Yi Xian's face instantly darkened. Damn it. My older sister caused trouble, yet I have to deal with it. Who's going to deal with it for me? Even though he was furious, he didn't dare say anything. He couldn't defeat her. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, Father, isn't this clone of yours here? Why don't you let this clone go? You're so strong. The green-robed man spoke indifferently, you seem to have a lot of questions. Yi Xian was speechless. The green-robed man continued, is there a problem with a younger brother helping his older sister? Yi Xian laughed bitterly. Father, you don't care about older sister either. She often causes trouble, and that's not good. The green-robed man's expression was calm. I don't care about you either, do I? Yi Xian was speechless. The green-robed man said, you have to go quickly because she seems to have used the strand of sword energy I left for her. She's probably in a very bad situation right now. If anything happens to her, I'll skin you alive. Yi Xian glanced at the green-robed man and couldn't help but say in his heart. Damn it. I really want to ask Qing, to beat you to death. The problem was that Qing, might not be able to beat father to death. Moreover, father even formed a clique and hung out with big brother. The green-robed man suddenly said, are you cursing me in your heart? Yi Xian hurriedly shook his head. No. No. The green-robed man chuckled. I know you're unhappy, but you can't do anything to me. Hee. Yi Xian was speechless. The green-robed man chuckled and said, I'm not going to talk nonsense with you anymore. Remember, if you don't hurry to the burial god territory in 3 days, you'll have to bear the consequences. Hee. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned illusory. Yi Xian's expression was calm. Meanwhile, the green-robed man suddenly said, I'm leaving. You don't seem to be reluctant at all. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, I'm sad. The green-robed man roared with laughter. Kid, I hope you'll be able to take a blow from me the next time we meet. Otherwise, it'll be too boring. As soon as he finished speaking, he seemed to have thought of something and opened his palm. The 3 strands of sword energy that Dong Linan had left for Yi Xian instantly flew out and fell into the green-robed man's hand. The green-robed man smiled. It's not a good habit to use external objects. I'll be taking these 3 strands of sword energy with me. Take care. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished completely. Yi Xian's expression was extremely ugly. Damn it. He's taken all the sword energy. Damn it. Isn't father afraid that something might happen to me? Yi Xian's lungs were on the verge of exploding with rage. Xiao Ta suddenly floated over to Yi Xian, and he spoke with a trembling voice, Young master, we're still unable to defeat master. Yi Xian had a calm expression on his face after he calmed down. If we can't defeat him, then we can't. Continue working hard. One day, we'll be able to defeat him. Xiao Ta spoke in a low voice, all right. Yi Xian turned around to gaze at the experts of the Profound Sword Immortal sect. At this moment, all the swordsmen were looking at him, and all the swordsmen had extremely strange expressions on their faces. They hadn't imagined that Yi Xian was actually the son of the Profound Sword Immortal sect's ancestor. What the fuck? He really gave birth to a son late. Yi Xian spoke indifferently, from this moment onward, I'm the sect master of the Profound Sword Immortal sect. Who objects? Who agrees? All the experts of the Profound Sword Immortal sect hurriedly expressed their agreement. They couldn't defeat Qin Shi, and their founding ancestor was Qin Shi's father. So, how could they possibly object? Just like that, Yi Xian had become the sect master of the Profound Sword Immortal sect. Yi Xian arrived at the Profound Sword Immortal sect's Profound Sword Hall. He glanced at it and said, change the name of this hall. Xiao Ming hesitated for a moment and said, change it to what? Yi Xian spoke indifferently, change it to the Hall of Acting Cool. Xiao Ming was speechless. Yi Xian walked into the hall, and Yi Xian was instantly speechless upon entering it. His father's statue. The Profound Sword Immortal sect had a statue of his father as well. However, it wasn't outside but within the hall. Yi Xian glanced at the statue, and he was instantly infuriated. Remove it. Xiao Ming's face was covered in astonishment. Remove it. Yi Xian spoke indifferently, remove it immediately. Then replace it with mine. Xiao Ming was speechless. Yi Xian turned around to look at Xiao Ming. Is there a problem? Xiao Ming hesitated for a moment and said, Sect Master, are you serious? Yi Xian spoke indifferently, do I look like I'm joking to you? Xiao Ming was speechless. Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings, and then he turned around and left. It didn't take long for him to arrive at a side hall. This side hall was filled with the treasures of the Profound Sword Immortal sect. Yi Xian glanced at it and said, who do these treasures belong to? Xiao Ming replied, they belong to the sect. Yi Xian asked again, who does the sect belong to? Xiao Ming hesitated for a moment and said, yours. Yi Xian nodded. Wrap them up for me. Xiao Ming was speechless. After putting away the treasures, Yi Xian strolled around the Profound Sword Immortal sect. In the end, he didn't find any treasures before giving up. In the sky above the Profound Sword Immortal sect, Yi Xian looked at Xiao Ming in front of him. This chaotic world belongs to us? Xiao Ming nodded. Yes. We all absorb the chaotic energy from this chaotic world to cultivate. Chaotic energy. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. The next moment, he felt endless chaotic energy. Yi Xian opened his eyes and looked at Xiao Ming. Can I achieve an immortal body by absorbing this chaotic energy? Xiao Ming nodded. Yes. But it's too little. In fact, this primal chaos force was even more helpful to powerhouses at the 6th level of the cosmic heart realm. If they absorbed this primal chaos force, they would have a high chance of reaching the sacred heart realm. But after reaching the sacred heart realm, this primal chaos force wouldn't be as useful anymore. But there's no way around it. This star god vein is too rare. Only the previous sect master had one. Yi Xian frowned slightly. The Profound Firmament sect has one? Xiao Ming nodded. Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm and a storage ring appeared in his hand. He glanced at it. There was indeed a star god vein in the storage ring. However, this star god vein was about to dry up. It was about to be sucked dry. Yi Xian was speechless. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian looked at Xiao Ming. Where did he get this star god vein? Xiao Ming shook his head. I don't know the details. Yi Xian said in a low voice, has this Profound Firmament sect ever left this place? Xiao Ming nodded. Yes. 1,000 years ago, Sect Master Profound Firmament sect left the chaotic world. I don't know where he went. Anyway, when he came back, he was already at the immortal body realm. However, since then, he has never left. Yi Xian said softly, in that case, this Xuanzang sect master must have obtained some kind of opportunity outside. Xiao Ming nodded. I think so. Yi Xian thought for a while and then absorbed a part of the chaotic force into Xiao Ta's body. This chaotic force was of great help to Tu Qin and the others as it could quickly improve their cultivation. With the addition of the chaotic force, Yi Xian found that Tu Qin and the others' aura skyrocketed. Of course, this was also because they had cultivated for a very, very long time. Glancing at Tu Qin and the others, Yi Xian's lips curled up. It wouldn't take long for Tu Qin and the others to reach the Sacred Heart Realm. 3 days. Yi Xian felt a headache coming on when he thought about going to the Sky-Burying God Realm in 3 days. Why did he have to deal with the aftermath when his sister caused trouble? Speechless. At this moment, a swordsman suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian and Xiao Ming. The swordsman bowed slightly. Sect Master, the Deputy Pavilion Master of the Immortal Treasure Pavilion, Ambassador South, is here. Ambassador South. Yi Xian frowned. What is this woman doing here? The sword cultivator hesitated for a moment before he said, should we let her in? Yi Xian thought for a while and nodded. Let her in. The swordsman retreated. A moment later, Ambassador South came in front of Yi Xian. She looked at Yi Xian. You've become the sect master of the Mystic Sword Immortal Sect? Yi Xian nodded. Ambassador South was silent. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Ambassador South, what's the matter? Ambassador South hesitated. Can I open the primal chaos world? Yi Xian shook his head. No. Ambassador South looked at Yi Xian. You can't be so selfish. Yi Xian suddenly slapped her. Pa. Ambassador South was sent flying by Yi Xian's slap. Yi Xian looked at the southern ambassador who was sent flying. Did I give you face? After writing for 6 years, I realized that no matter how fancy I am, as long as I don't explode, monthly votes? That's just a dream. Reality is cruel. Chapter 2155. Ambassador Nan was stunned after being slapped away. Why did Yi Xian attack her just like that? Most importantly, how could he be so strong? Ambassador Nan gazed at Yi Xian, hesitated for a moment, and said, Young Master Yi, I know you're angry at me. Yi Xian suddenly shook his head. You're wrong. Ambassador Nan gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian grinned. I was angry at that time. After all, I treated you as a friend. But I'm not angry anymore because I've repaid you. Just like I said, we're even. As for now, I'm indeed the sect master of the Dark Sword Immortal Sect, and this chaotic world belongs to the Dark Sword Immortal Sect. He paused for a moment before he continued, why should I share the chaotic energy of this chaotic world with you? Who do you think you are? You're not my woman. Ambassador Nan was speechless. Yi Xian suddenly said, Elder Xiao, send her off. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Ambassador Nan suddenly said, Aren't you afraid that everyone will join forces against you? Yi Xian didn't even look back. If you dare to attack today, then the Immortal Treasure Pavilion will cease to exist tomorrow. Ambassador Nan's face turned ghastly pale. Elder Xiao gazed at her, fuck off. The Dark Sword Immortal Sect was naturally aware of Ambassador Nan's schemes. However, they hadn't gone to the Immortal Treasure Pavilion in the beginning. After all, they were quite afraid of the Immortal Treasure Pavilion. Of course, they were afraid of the mysterious Pavilion Master. However, the mysterious Pavilion Master hadn't made an appearance for 1,000 years. Now that he had Yi Xian, he wasn't afraid of the mysterious Pavilion Master at all. We have young Master Yi. Ambassador Nan remained silent for a long time before she turned around and left. How could she dare to resist? The weakest here was a Saint Heart, and she was the only Saint Heart in the Immortal Treasure Pavilion. The gap in their strength was too huge. However, she couldn't figure out how Yi Xian had become the sect master of the Dark Sword Immortal Sect. Her original plan was to let the forces behind Yi Xian fight against the Xian Sword Celestial Sect. After both sides suffered heavy losses, the Celestial Treasure Pavilion would take advantage of the situation. Now, Yi Xian had become the sect leader of the Mystic Sword Celestial Sect. The dragon-slaying teenager turned into a dragon? It might not be appropriate to say this, but she was indeed very depressed. Targeting Yi Xian? She really didn't have the guts. Even now, when he thought about the sword of the mysterious woman in the plain dress, he still felt his heart palpitate. At this time, the southern envoy suddenly stopped. She turned her head and looked around, a trace of confusion in her eyes. At this moment, she suddenly felt that the world was so unfair. Yi Xian managed to get what she had struggled for her whole life in such a short time. Thinking of this, Ambassador Nan's heart was filled with anger. She stopped and turned to look at Yi Xian, who was walking towards the Hall of Pretentiousness. I don't think it's fair. This world is too unfair. Yi Xian stopped and said softly, how can there be absolute fairness in this world? The southern envoy stared at Yi Xian. You're so lucky. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. He turned to look at the southern envoy and said with a smile, what are you trying to say? The southern envoy's expression was calm. You're lucky to have an invincible younger sister. If it wasn't for her, how could a person with ordinary talent like you have come this far? If it wasn't for her, how could you have become the sect leader of the Mystic Sword Celestial sect? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Miss Southern Envoy, we met because of good karma. Even after we settled our debts, I felt that we parted on good terms. I had no malice towards you, nor did I want to have malice towards you. But now, you insulted me. He shook his head again. I'm not angry at all. I'm just a little disappointed. You're no longer the wise and far-sighted Miss Southern Envoy I met. The Southern Envoy stared at Yi Xian. Am I wrong? Yi Xian smiled. Of course you're wrong. If it wasn't for Qing, I would still have my father. Do you know who this Mystic Sword Immortal sect belongs to? It's my father's. The Southern Envoy's expression froze. Yi Xian said again. Miss Southern Envoy, if you think it's unfair, then you can recognize me as your father. This way, you'll have a powerful backer. Hearing this, the Southern Envoy flew into a rage. You're insulting me. Before her voice fell, her pupils suddenly shrank. She wanted to retreat, but the next moment, a sword had pierced half an inch into her forehead. The Azure Profound Sword. The Azure Profound Sword directly suppressed the Southern Envoy's divine soul. The Southern Envoy stared at the distant Yi Xian. Your strength. Why are you so strong? Yi Xian smiled. I've always been strong. When I asked you whether you needed me to help you destroy the immortal Taoist temple, did you think I was bragging? The Southern Envoy's face was extremely ugly. She had thought that Yi Xian's strength was ordinary. She had never imagined that Yi Xian's strength was this strong. She had a sacred heart. But a sacred heart couldn't even fight back in front of Yi Xian? The Southern Envoy still wanted to say something, but the Azure Profound Sword completely absorbed her soul. Until her death, the Southern Envoy had never imagined that Yi Xian would really kill her. She died with everlasting regret. To Yi Xian, not killing her was his mercy, but it didn't mean that he wouldn't kill her. He, Yi Xian, would repay kindness with kindness and enmity with enmity. The original kindness had been repaid. They were even. After Yi Xian returned to the hall, he learned about the Mystic Sword Immortal sect from Xiao Ming. There were more than 40 swordsmen in the Mystic Sword Immortal sect, all of whom had a sacred heart. Everyone's goal was the immortal body. There were also a few swordsmen who chose to focus on Sword Dao, and these swordsmen who specialized in Sword Dao were the strongest in the Mystic Sword Immortal sect. The Mystic Sword Immortal sect was very strong. However, he still didn't plan to bring these swordsmen to the Heaven Burial Sacred Territory. Because he was too strong now. He wouldn't even be afraid of an eternal immortal body, let alone an immortal body. Therefore, after giving Xiao Ming some instructions, Yi Xian set off for the Heaven Burial Sacred Territory. Before he left Tu Chen and the others in the Mystic Sword Immortal sect because they had also reached the Sacred Heart Realm. In the Milky Way, Yi Xian shuttled back and forth on his sword. On the way, Xiao Ta suddenly asked, Young Master, will we become the younger brother when we go to the Heaven Burial Sacred Territory? Yi Xian shook his head. I don't know. Xiao Ta wanted to say something else, but Yi Xian suddenly said, Stop talking nonsense. We need to hurry. With that, his figure flickered and disappeared at the end of the Milky Way. His father had only given him a rough route, so he couldn't use the profound azure sword to directly travel to the Heaven Burial's sacred territory. Heaven Burial's sacred territory. The name didn't sound like a good place. Yi Xian felt a headache coming on. He didn't know what trouble his sister had caused over there. He felt a little sullen at the thought. Why should the younger brother clean up the mess for the older sister? What af** kept up life? Half a month later, Yi Xian finally arrived at the Heaven Burial sacred territory. Yi Xian furrowed his brows as soon as he entered the Heaven Burial god domain. That was because he sensed a strong murderous intent and evil energy the moment he stepped into the Heaven Burial god domain. Yi Xian looked around. The air was filled with the smell of blood. Yi Xian was about to leave and an old man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at the old man calmly. The old man smiled. Is this young master's first time in the Heaven Burial sacred territory? Yi Xian nodded, yes. The old man smiled. Greetings, young master. This old man is from the Celestial Treasure Pavilion. Celestial Treasure Pavilion. Yi Xian was shocked. Celestial Treasure Pavilion? The old man nodded, yes. As he spoke, he took out a scroll. Young master is new here, so you're definitely not familiar with the Heaven Burial sacred territory. I have some information here that describes in detail the various powers and experts in the Heaven Burial sacred territory, as well as some dangerous places. Originally, it required 100 star veins, but now it only requires 88 star veins, 88 star veins. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. Why don't you just rob someone? Won't I know everything you said after I ask around? The old man stroked his beard and smiled. Young master will naturally know the basic information once you ask around. However, some information can't be obtained just by asking around. For example, which places are dangerous, which people are dangerous, and so on. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he said, give me one. As he spoke, he flicked his finger, and a spatial ring descended before the old man. The old man grinned, and then he passed the scroll to Yi Xian. After Yi Xian put the scroll away, the old man took out another scroll, and then he said, young master, this scroll describes in detail the cultivation realms and combat strengths of those dangerous people, and the danger level of those dangerous places. Do you need it? Yi Xian's face froze when he heard that. Fuck. What a trap. What a trap. Yi Xian suddenly smiled, give me one. As he spoke, he flicked his finger, and a spatial ring descended before the old man. The old man hurriedly put it away, and then he passed the scroll to Yi Xian. When Yi Xian put it away, the old man took out another scroll, and then he said, young master, I can see that your strength is extraordinary, and ordinary experts shouldn't be much of a threat to you. My scroll records some relatively mysterious and extraordinary experts, and all of them are extremely formidable. I only want 180 star veins. Are you interested? Yi Xian glanced at the old man, give me one. As he spoke, he flicked his finger, and then a spatial ring descended before the old man. The old man hurriedly put it away, and then he took out another scroll. Young master, based on your expression, it should be your first time here. I presume you're either looking for the star-searching divine veins or someone. There are a few maps in this scroll, and they record a few ruins. The weakest ruins belong to experts with eternal realm willpower. My Immortal Treasure Pavilion is holding an event today, and I don't want 10,000 or 8,000. I only want 3,800 star veins. Are you interested? Yi Xian nodded his head, yes. As he spoke, he flicked his finger, and a spatial ring fell in front of the old man. The old man was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth. He hurriedly put away the spatial ring, and then he took out a token. Young master, if you get a divine item or a star divine vein, you'll definitely be hunted down. This is a protection token. As long as you have this token, you can stay in my Immortal Treasure Pavilion for a day. During this day, you'll be under the protection of my Immortal Treasure Pavilion. Young master, the previous ones are not essential to you, but you must buy the last one. It's a life-saving token. It only costs 5,200 star veins, 5,200 star veins for a life. Is it worth it? Yi Xian glanced at the old man. It's worth it. As he spoke, he flicked his finger, and a spatial ring fell in front of the old man. The old man was so happy that his eyes were about to close. He hurriedly put away the spatial ring, and then he took out a piece of white cloth that was filled with words. Young master, since you chose to buy a protection token, it's obvious that you're here to cause trouble. In that case, I have no choice but to recommend this for you. As he spoke, he said seriously, this is a life insurance. If you buy this insurance, as long as you're in danger and injured, you'll enjoy free rescue from the Immortal Treasure Pavilion. No matter where you are, the Immortal Treasure Pavilion will rush to your rescue in the shortest time possible. Also, the Immortal Treasure Pavilion will pay for all the medical expenses after you're injured. Apart from that, every time you're injured, you'll receive compensation from the Immortal Treasure Pavilion. As for the amount of compensation, it'll depend on your injury. If you're unlucky enough to die in a battle, the Immortal Treasure Pavilion will compensate you tenfold. For example, if you spend 10,000 star veins to buy this insurance, you'll receive 100,000 star veins as compensation after you die. We'll give these to your family. Moreover, after you die, we will also bury you. We will handle your funeral in a dignified manner so that you can leave in style. Yi Xian. Chapter 2156. Yi Xian fell silent. The Celestial Treasure Pavilion. Fuck. He suddenly realized that he'd severely underestimated the Celestial Treasure Pavilion. Meanwhile, the old man gazed at Yi Xian and smiled. Young master, based on your appearance, I can tell that you're here to cause trouble. If you take this risk, then you'll definitely make a profit. Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and a command token appeared in his hand. The Dark Sky Token. The old man's expression instantly froze when he saw the Dark Sky Token in Yi Xian's hand. Yi Xian smiled. Based on your expression, you should recognize this token. The old man suddenly put the white cloth away, and then he bowed slightly. I didn't know young master's identity just now. I was rude. Yi Xian smiled. What's the relationship between all of you and the Celestial Treasure Pavilion? The old man smiled. We're a family. However, everyone does things their own way. They're in charge of worlds with comparatively lower martial Dao civilizations, and we're in charge of worlds with comparatively higher martial Dao civilizations. Yi Xian was quite curious. Exactly how many families does your Celestial Treasure Pavilion have? The old man hesitated for a moment, and then he shook his head. I don't know the specifics. Only the pavilion master knows. Yi Xian asked, is your pavilion master here? The old man shook his head. She isn't. As for where she is, I don't know as well because I've never met her. The pavilion master of the Celestial Treasure Pavilion. Yi Xian fell silent. She's really mysterious. Meanwhile, the old man suddenly withdrew all the spatial rings that Yi Xian had given him, and then he returned them to Yi Xian. Young master, you're the most distinguished guest of my Celestial Treasure Pavilion, and you enjoy all the rights of the Celestial Treasure Pavilion. Take these. Yi Xian put the spatial rings away, and then he smiled. How many star veins do you earn every single day? The old man smiled embarrassedly. Not much. On good days, a few thousand star veins a day. A few thousand star veins. Yi Xian's expression froze when he heard this. Fuck. That's too profitable. Yi Xian restrained his thoughts and said, help me look for someone. The old man quickly said, all right. Yi Xian opened his palm and a painting appeared in his hand. It's her. The old man received the portrait and said, young master, please wait a moment. It won't take too long, just 15 minutes will do. With that, he turned around and left. 15 minutes. Yi Xian looked at the departing old man in silence. The strength of the Celestial Treasure Pavilion was terrifying. At this time, the old man appeared in front of Yi Xian again. The old man's expression was solemn. Young lord, we've found this woman. May I ask who she is? Yi Xian said, my sister. The old man said solemnly, your sister is in danger. Yi Xian frowned. What do you mean? The old man's expression was rather solemn. She's being chased by Burial Mountain right now. Yi Xian was a little puzzled. Burial Mountain? The old man nodded. The strongest superpower in this world. Yi Xian's expression instantly darkened. This big sister is really good at causing trouble. The old man continued. Not only that, but according to what we know, she killed a young master from the land of the gods. She's being chased by 2 superpowers. Yi Xian's expression froze. The old man glanced at Yi Xian. Should we go save her? Yi Xian asked. What realm is the strongest person in these 2 powers? The old man said solemnly, Eternal. Eternal. Yi Xian felt a headache coming on. Even though he wasn't afraid of Eternal, it didn't mean that he could defeat eternal beings. After all, eternal beings could enter the river of time as well. This big sister. Yi Xian shook his head. The old man continued. Young master, if you want to save her, then you must rush over immediately because your sister's situation isn't optimistic. Yi Xian looked at the old man. Can I mobilize the experts of the Celestial Treasure Pavilion within my authority? The old man nodded. Yes. Yi Xian was overjoyed. I want to mobilize your eternal immortal experts. The old man wanted to say something but hesitated. Yi Xian frowned. Why? The old man smiled awkwardly. We don't. No. Yi Xian was shocked. Are you joking? You don't have eternal immortal experts? The old man nodded. Indeed we don't. If we do, young master can mobilize them. But we don't. Yi Xian, the old man smiled awkwardly. We are businessmen. We don't usually fight. Yi Xian said solemnly. If you don't have strength, how can you establish a foothold here? Didn't they rob you a long time ago? The old man smiled. The reason they don't dare to touch us is because our pavilion master almost killed them. Therefore, the ancestors of their forces have issued a death order not to provoke the Celestial Treasure Pavilion. Mysterious Pavilion Master. Yi Xian fell silent. He was more and more curious about the mysterious Pavilion Master of the Celestial Treasure Pavilion. Of course, he was also troubled. Damn it. You have the right to mobilize our experts, but we don't have any experts for you. Holy shit. This Celestial Treasure Pavilion is really a deity. The old man hesitated. Young Master Yi, if you don't go, your sister will be in danger, Yi Xian said calmly. Don't worry. Even if I die, she won't die. With that, he turned and disappeared into the horizon. The old man hurriedly said, Young Master Yi, I haven't told you where she is. Yi Xian returned to the old man. Where? The old man said solemnly. In the Su-Kuan Sea. Go to the right and you will reach it. Yi Xian nodded. As if he thought of something, he suddenly said, Can I buy that personal accident insurance? The old man shook his head. No. Yi Xian was puzzled. Because I'm your VIP? The old man shook his head again. No. We will evaluate the risk when we sell it. Young Master Yi. Our evaluation is that people like you are very dangerous and have a high chance of dying. Therefore, we can't sell it to you. We are afraid of losing money. Yi Xian gave him a thumbs up. You specialize in making sure you don't lose money. You guys are awesome. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and transformed into a streak of sword light that vanished into the horizon. The old man was speechless. To Yi Xian, traveling 10,000 miles was just a matter of a snap of his fingers. After arriving at the Su-Kuan Sea, Yi Xian found that the scenery was quite beautiful. The seawater was clear like a mirror. He could see the bottom of the sea at a glance. When he arrived, it happened to be night time. Therefore, the sky full of stars was reflected in the sea. It was beautiful. After admiring it for a while, Yi Xian looked into the distance. The next moment, he disappeared from where he was because he had already sensed Yang Nianshue's aura. Soon, Yi Xian saw Yang Nianxue. When he saw her, Yi Xian was stunned. At this time, Yang Nianxue was in a somewhat miserable state. Not only was there blood at the corner of her mouth, but one of her arms had been cut off. In addition, her aura was very weak, and her face was as pale as paper. She was seriously injured. Yi Xian frowned. Why was his sister in such a miserable state? Not far in front of Yang Nianxue stood an old man and a middle-aged man. Both of them had eternal will, and there were 10 people around them. These 10 people had eternal bodies. They had been ganged up on. Seeing Yi Xian, Yang Nianxue was overjoyed. She ran in front of Yi Xian and gave Yi Xian a big hug. Then she said excitedly, "Brother, my dear little brother, I missed you so much." Yi Xian was speechless. In the distance, the old man and the middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian, and they frowned when they saw Yi Xian. They couldn't see through Yi Xian's cultivation. Yang Nianxue moved closer to Yi Xian and said softly, "Brother, did you come alone?" Yi Xian nodded. Yang Nianxue looked at Yi Xian. "Where's father?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "He said he went to have fun." Yang Nianxue was stunned, and then she flared up with rage. "That beast!" Yi Xian was speechless. Yang Nianxue hesitated for a moment and said, "Did he give you anything to save your life? For example, sword energy?" Yi Xian shook his head. "No." Yang Nianxue was astounded. "Not even a strand of sword energy?" Yi Xian nodded. "Not even a strand of sword energy?" Yang Nianxue hesitated for a moment and said, "When I left, he gave me 5 strands of sword energy." Yi Xian was speechless. Yang Nianxue was slightly helpless. "I used them all." As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. "Brother, father didn't even give you a strand of sword energy. I seriously suspect that you're not father's biological son." Yi Xian's expression froze. Yang Nianxue said again, "Can you be called Tianming?" Yi Xian shook his head. Yang Nianxue's face darkened. "Are you sure?" Yi Xian was helpless. "I'm sure." Yang Nianxue looked at Yi Xian. "Then why did you come here?" Yi Xian said indifferently, "Father asked me to help you, but it seems like I can't help you with anything." Yang Nianxue's face fell. Yi Xian was slightly curious. "Why did you fight with them?" Yang Nianxue blinked and said, "I found a mystic realm. There are many treasures in that mystic realm, and there are even star god veins." Yi Xian hurriedly said, "How many?" Yang Nianxue looked at Yi Xian warily. "Not many, just 1 or 2. Yi Xian glared at Yang Nianxue. "Why would they chase after you just because of 1 or 2? Are they crazy?" Yang Nianxue hesitated for a moment and said, "A dozen or so." Yi Xian said indifferently, "Just how many?" Yang Nianxue said, "It's true, just a dozen or so. I can swear that if I'm lying, father will be hacked to death." The man in green was speechless. Yi Xian looked at Yang Nianxue. "If you don't tell the truth, then I'm leaving." As he spoke, he turned and left. Yang Nianxue's expression changed drastically, and she hurriedly pulled on Yi Xian. "Little brother, you're my biological little brother." Yi Xian said indifferently, "What if it's fake?" Yang Nianxue was speechless. Yi Xian said again, "How many?" Yang Nianxue hesitated for a moment and said, "A few hundred." "A few hundred." Yi Xian's eyelids twitched, and he raised a finger. "Half, give me half." Yang Nianxue jumped up. You're too ruthless. Too ruthless. Yi Xian said calmly, then you can call me Dad. Let father save you. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Yang Nianxue hurriedly pulled on Yi Xian. Don't. We can talk, we can talk. Yi Xian looked at Yang Nianxue. Are you giving it to me or not? Yang Nianxue nodded. Yes. I'll give it to you. Yi Xian opened his right hand. Give it to me first, then I'll help you fight. Yang Nianxue hesitated. At this moment, the old man suddenly said, Your Excellency, are you going to interfere? Yi Xian glanced at Yang Nianxue, and then said, I'm not interfering. You guys continue. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Yang Nianxue's expression changed, and she hurriedly said, I'll give it to you after the fight. Yi Xian rolled his eyes. Big sister, we're all on the same side, so don't play tricks. Don't you have any idea what kind of character our family is? Yang Nianxue was speechless. P.S. I will definitely explode, but not now. This month is almost over. Can you guys vote for me first? I never go back on my word. After being together for so many years, you should trust my character, right? Chapter 2157. In the end, Yang Nianxue reluctantly gave Yi Xian a spatial ring, and there were 150 star god veins within it. After he put the spatial ring away, Yi Xian gazed at the old man who led the group. The old man said, Do you really intend to interfere in this matter? They were quite vigilant and fearful of Yi Xian, because they couldn't sense Yi Xian's strength. Yi Xian said with a serious expression, Of course I'm going to interfere. She's my older sister, and blood is thicker than water. Bullying her is equivalent to bullying me. Yang Nianxue was speechless. The old man's gaze gradually turned icy cold when he heard Yi Xian. Kill. As soon as he finished speaking, the two Eternal Realm experts behind him charged at Yi Xian. However, he didn't attack. He wanted to probe Chen Shi's strength first. As soon as they moved, 2 rays of light pierced through their foreheads. Hiss. Hiss. 2 strands of blood sprayed out. Instant annihilation. Moreover, it was instant annihilation. The expressions of the old man and middle-aged man instantly changed when they witnessed this scene. On the other hand, Yang Nianxue, who stood by Yi Xian's side, had a shocked expression on her face. Is this little brother that strong? Meanwhile, the old man spoke in a low voice, May I know who you are? Yi Xian smiled, All of you can attack me together. Attack him together. The expressions of the old man and middle-aged man instantly became unsightly when they heard this. Yi Xian opened his palm, and the green profound sword appeared in his grasp. The old man's expression changed drastically when he witnessed this scene, and then he said, Let's go. Let's go. As soon as he spoke, the old man and the others turned around and vanished into the horizon. In the end, they didn't choose to go head-on against Chen Shi. Going head-on against Chen Shi might be pointless. After all, experts of such a level weren't existences that they could deal with. Yang Nianxue gazed at Yi Xian once she saw the old man and the others flee. She sized Yi Xian up and said, Little brother, how did you become so strong? Yi Xian said with a smile, That makes me strong? I didn't even use 10% of my strength in that sword strike just now. Yang Nianxue glared at Yi Xian. Don't pretend in front of me. Yi Xian laughed. Meanwhile, Yang Nianxue spoke solemnly, Brother, let's head to the ruins again. Yi Xian hurriedly said, You didn't take all the treasures from the ruins? Yang Nianxue shook her head. No. I didn't dare to go deeper because it's too dangerous. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he asked, How dangerous? Yang Nianxue glanced at Yi Xian, and then she said, There's no danger with you here. Yi Xian was speechless. After Yang Nianxue recovered from her injuries, the two of them headed for the relic. Not long after, the two of them arrived at an island deep in the void Kuan Sea. Yang Nianxue glanced at the surroundings and said, "The void Kuan Ocean isn't simple. We have to be careful." Yi Xian was a little curious. "Sis, why aren't you with Dad? Aren't you able to get anything you want by following him?" Yang Nianxue rolled her eyes. "I have no freedom by his side. I can come out by myself and play however I want. Isn't that great?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "That's true." Yang Nianxue led Yi Xian to a huge stone door, but there was nothing behind it. Yi Xian asked, "Is it inside?" Yang Nianxue nodded. She walked over to the door and took out a white box. A stream of air slowly drifted out from within the box. Crack. Suddenly, Yi Xian heard a sound, and then a white vortex appeared behind the door. Yang Nianxue hurriedly put the box away. Yi Xian was quite curious. "Sis, what's in that box?" Yang Nianxue smiled, "Whitey's aura." Yi Xian's brows knit together slightly. "Whitey's aura?" Yang Nianxue nodded. "It's very useful to use her aura to explore some ruins. Because some ruins are guarded by formations or barriers. Barriers and formations mean that they have a spirit, and if they have a spirit, then they'll fall for Whitey's trick." Yi Xian was speechless. The siblings entered the black vortex, and a short while later, they arrived at a huge stone square. The square was a few kilometers wide, and there was a floating black hall not too far away from them. There were 2 words above the hall, "Void Kuan Ocean Palace." Yang Nianxue said, "I came here before, and I obtained the star god vein from here. However, I wasn't able to enter the hall." Yi Xian asked, "Someone is guarding it?" Yang Nianxue nodded. "Very strong." Yi Xian looked at the hall and said, "Your box." Yang Nianxue rolled her eyes at Yi Xian. "Whitey is useless against people." Yi Xian was speechless. Yang Nianxue continued, "There was definitely a very strong sect here in the past, but it was destroyed for some unknown reason. There are definitely a lot of good things in that hall. We'll be rich if we can enter it." Yi Xian looked at the hall, and then he opened his palm, and Xiao Ta appeared in it. Xiao Ta hurriedly said, "Young master, what are you doing?" Yi Xian said seriously, "Xiao Ta, with your current strength, who can harm you in less than 3 strikes? Don't be afraid. Go." As he spoke, he suddenly tossed it towards the hall. Xiao Ta had just touched the hall when a ray of white light suddenly slashed Xiao Ta's body. Bang! Xiao Ta was instantly sent flying. Yi Xian opened his palm, and Xiao Ta fell into his hand. At the same time, he retreated a few dozen meters. Yi Xian looked at Xiao Ta, and he noticed that there were actually some cracks on Xiao Ta's body. Yi Xian looked at the hall and frowned slightly. "Interesting." Xiao Ta suddenly said, "Young master, you." Yi Xian suddenly said, "I'll ask Qing, to improve your strength the next time I see her." Xiao Ta immediately changed his words, "Young master, I'm willing to go through fire and water for you." Yi Xian was speechless. Yang Nianxue glanced at Xiao Ta, and then she said, "Why has Xiao Ta become so fancy after being with you for so long?" Yi Xian was speechless. Yang Nianxue said, "Do you have any other way?" Yi Xian smiled, "Yes." Yang Nianxue hurriedly asked, "What way?" Yi Xian said, "Let's go in." As he spoke, he walked towards the hall in the distance. Yang Nianxue pulled on Yi Xian's arm and asked seriously, "Are you confident?" Yi Xian nodded. Yang Nianxue hesitated for a moment, and then she nodded, "Be careful. If you think it's dangerous, then we don't want it. In any case, Dad and Mom have bought a lot of assets for us, and we have assets to inherit." Xiao Ta was speechless. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he said, "Do we have a lot of assets?" Yang Nianxue blinked. "You don't even know?" Yi Xian's face darkened. "Like hell I know." Yang Nianxue's expression became slightly strange. Yi Xian sighed softly, our family values women more than men. As soon as he finished speaking, he walked towards the hall in the distance. When he arrived before the hall, a ray of white light slashed over, and the green profound sword in Yi Xian's hand transformed into a sword shield that blocked in front of him. Bang! The green profound sword shield trembled violently, and it forcibly withstood the attack. After withstanding the attack, Yi Xian's figure trembled, and he directly entered the hall. However, the next moment, he seemed to feel something, and his expression changed. The next moment, bang! In the hall, following a muffled sound, Yi Xian was directly thrown out of the hall. Yang Nianxue hurriedly ran in front of Yi Xian, and she was a little worried. Are you all right? Yi Xian shook his head slightly, and he looked into the hall, and said in a deep voice, there's someone alive inside. Alive? Yang Nianxue looked up at the hall in the distance, and at this moment, an old man slowly walked over. The old man wore a thick black robe, and he was rather short, but his eyes were very sharp. The old man glanced at Yang Nianxue, and then looked at Yi Xian, swordsman. Yi Xian smiled, yes. After a moment of silence, the old man said, your realm isn't high enough, but your strength is terrifyingly strong. You're someone who doesn't cultivate realm. Yi Xian nodded, yes. After a moment of silence, the old man said, what are you doing here? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then said, Senior, if I may ask, you are. The old man's expression was calm, I'm no longer here. What you see now is just a trace of my image. Image. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Senior is an expert above the eternal immortal realm. The old man glanced at Yi Xian, yes. Yi Xian smiled, Senior, to be honest, us brother and sister are here for the inheritance. Inheritance. The old man fell silent. Yi Xian asked softly, Senior left behind an inheritance, right? The old man nodded, yes, but I'm afraid the two of you aren't suitable. Yi Xian was slightly puzzled, why? The old man said in a deep voice, you're already so strong, why do you still need an inheritance? Hearing that, Yi Xian was instantly overjoyed. It was the first time he had been praised like this. In the past, he was like a little brother to him. The old man said again, you're cultivating the boundless realm, and I'm cultivating the existence realm, so it's not suitable for you. Moreover, you're so strong that even my main body might not be able to do anything to you. Also, the sword in your hand is extremely extraordinary, and the person who made this sword is definitely stronger than me. Therefore, my inheritance isn't of much use to you. Yi Xian hurriedly said, Senior, you've misunderstood. Although I'm cultivating the boundless realm, I'll use these realms as reference. If Senior is willing to give your inheritance to me, I'll definitely bring it to greater heights. The old man fell silent. He seemed to be hesitating. Yi Xian said again, Senior, it's not that I'm boasting, but after today, it'll be difficult for you to find a super genius like me. Yang Nianxue couldn't help but glance at Yi Xian when she heard that. Can you be a little more shameless? Yi Xian was speechless. The corners of the old man's mouth couldn't help but twitch. Damn it, I've seen shameless people, but I've never seen someone so shameless. Yi Xian continued, Senior, look at me again. Were there many monstrous geniuses like me in your era? The old man hesitated for a moment and said, not many. Yi Xian continued, then do you think you'll be able to meet someone as outstanding as me? The old man glanced at Yi Xian and said, it'll be difficult. Yi Xian said seriously, then what are you hesitating for? The old man said softly, you're good, but your skin is a little too thick. I'm afraid you'll ruin my reputation one day. Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 2158. His reputation would be ruined. Yi Xian was instantly infuriated when he heard the old man. This geezer really doesn't know how to speak properly. Yang Nianxue couldn't help but chuckle when she saw Yi Xian being humiliated. The old man continued, "Young brother, you're very strong, so you really don't need my inheritance. Moreover, our daos are completely different, so my dao isn't suitable for you." Yi Xian thought for a moment and nodded, "Then I won't force you." As he spoke, he glanced at Yang Nianxue. "You've gotten lucky." Yang Nianxue chuckled, "We're all family, so you've gotten lucky as well." Yi Xian puckered his lips and didn't say anything. The old man sized up Yang Nianxue and said, "Actually, you aren't very suitable as well." Yang Nianxue's smile froze when she heard this. Yi Xian roared with laughter. The old man sighed softly, "Both of you are very outstanding, but both of you really aren't suitable for my inheritance." Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, "Senior, then how long do you intend to wait?" The old man fell silent, and his expression was quite dim. The two people before him were not bad, but it was a pity that they were not suitable for his inheritance. That was because he could tell that their origins were not simple, and the daos they cultivated far surpassed his daos. Thus, if he were to give his inheritance to the two of them, it would not be long before his inheritance would be eliminated by the two of them, and he would eventually disappear from this world. It wasn't that they weren't good, they were too good. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Senior, how about this? Give your inheritance to me, and I'll find an heir for you in the future." The old man gazed at Yi Xian, "You'll find an heir for me?" Yi Xian nodded, "Since both of us aren't suitable for your inheritance, then we'll help you find one. It's better than waiting here bitterly. What do you think?" The old man pondered deeply for a long time before he nodded, "All right." As he spoke, he opened his palm, and a black scroll appeared in his hand. He looked at Yi Xian, and the scroll slowly floated in front of Yi Xian. "My inheritance is in this." Yi Xian put the scroll away and said, "Senior, aren't you afraid that I'll take it for myself?" The old man laughed. "Young friend, your great Dao far surpasses my Dao. You won't be interested in this level of inheritance." Yi Xian smiled and put away the scroll. The old man opened his palm and a storage ring appeared in his hand. He said, "After I died, my life savings were all here." As he spoke, he glanced at the two of them. "I'll give them to you." After that, the storage ring flew over to Yi Xian and Yang Nianxue. He knew that they'd definitely come to seek wealth. If he didn't give them some benefits, then his inheritance might be sold off by them. The corners of Yi Xian and Yang Nianxue's mouths raised slightly when they heard this. Yi Xian reacted swiftly and immediately put the storage ring away. Actually, they really didn't care much about this inheritance. What they cared about was wealth. Yi Xian was suddenly a little curious. "Senior, as far as I know, powerhouses like you can be reborn even if you only have a wisp of consciousness left, let alone a wisp of your soul. Why did you?" The old man smiled bitterly, "You're right. Under normal circumstances, even a strand of consciousness can be reborn. However, I died an unnatural death." Yi Xian frowned slightly, "An unnatural death?" The old man nodded, "When I was killed all those years ago, my future and present were severed. In other words, I was completely wiped out. So, I can't be reborn. Even if I can be reborn, I'll still die." Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, "Severed the present and future of that person?" The old man smiled, "Young friend, you should be able to do that as well." Yi Xian fell silent. He really did have that strength, but he'd overlooked it all this time. Now that he thought about it, he noticed that every single person he'd killed had been completely wiped out by him, and there wasn't any trace of life left in them. The old man continued, "This strand of my soul was left behind at the very beginning. Otherwise, we wouldn't have met today." Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, "Senior, how strong was the person who killed you?" The old man glanced at Yi Xian, "Very strong." Yang Nianxue suddenly asked, "How strong is very strong?" The old man thought for a moment and said, "I wasn't even able to resist a single attack from him all those years ago." Yi Xian suddenly asked, "Was it a swordsman?" The old man shook his head, "No." Yi Xian and Yang Nianxue exchanged glances. It wasn't a swordsman. Since it wasn't a swordsman, then it wasn't one of the three swords. After all, there were other extraordinary big shots besides the three swords in this world. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment before he said, "Senior, can you tell me about that person?" The old man stared at Yi Xian. "It's best that you don't." Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. "Why?" The old man laughed bitterly. "If I tell him about it, then he'll know right away. At that time, both of you will be in danger." Yang Nianxue turned to look at Yi Xian. "Are you afraid?" Yi Xian replied with a question, "Aren't you?" Yang Nianxue hesitated for a moment and said, "You seem to be quite strong now, so there's no need for us to be afraid." Yi Xian glared at Yang Nianxue. "Do you think I'm your father?" Even though he wasn't weak now, he wasn't Xiao Ta who would say that he was invincible under the three swords, and he would trade one for one above the three swords. Damn it. He'd been beaten up for so many years, so if he still hadn't improved at all, then wouldn't he have lived his life like a dog? Yang Nianxue puckered her lips and didn't say another word. Actually, she was quite afraid as well. If the old man really was very strong, then the two of them might really die here. The old man hesitated for a moment before he said, "Even though I don't dare to say anything about him, I can give you a reminder. He always carries a small bamboo basket on his back." His voice hadn't finished resounding through the air when the old man's soul suddenly ignited, and then he vanished in the next moment as if he'd never appeared. Yi Xian and Yang Nianxue were dumbfounded when they witnessed this scene. He was perfectly fine, but he vanished just like that. Meanwhile, the space in front of them suddenly trembled slightly, and a mysterious aura was growing closer and closer. Yi Xian and Yang Nianxue looked at each other. The brother and sister were suddenly a little nervous. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, "Big sis, call me dad." Yang Nianxue spoke in a low voice, "Go ahead." Yi Xian turned to look at Yang Nianxue. "Don't tell me that you can't call him." Yang Nianxue nodded. "You guessed it right, brother." Yi Xian's expression froze. That aura was growing closer and closer. Yi Xian's expression became solemn. "Big sis, are you sure you can't call him dad?" Yang Nianxue spoke in a low voice. "Brother, why don't you bring up the rear?" Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, Xiao Ta suddenly said, "Damn it, you two idiots are still chattering here. Can't you just run away?" Hearing this, Yi Xian and Yang Nianxue were stunned. In the next moment, Yi Xian took Yang Nianxue and vanished on the spot. Run away. Not long after Yi Xian and Yang Nianxue slipped away, a soft suddenly sounded from within the hall, and in the next moment, the entire ruins turned into nothingness. Yi Xian and Yang Nianxue appeared on the surface of the ocean, and they heaved sighs of relief when they saw the ruins below them vanish without a trace. Yang Nianxue spoke in a low voice, "It's really dangerous out there." Yi Xian glanced at Yang Nianxue. "Big sis, I think you should go back and follow dad. Even though it isn't so free, it's safe." Yang Nianxue shook her head. "Following dad is too boring. Moreover, Little White and Area aren't here, so it's too boring." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he said, "Big sis, it's not impossible for you to live in the outside world, but can you become stronger?" Yang Nianxue glared at Yi Xian. "Do you think I'm a burden to you?" Yi Xian hurriedly shook his head. "No." Yang Nianxue snorted, and then she said, "Little brother, you can't be so narrow-minded. Even though I'm not very strong now, I've been with dad for so many years, and I still have some connections. I can help you in the future." Yi Xian curled his lips. "I don't believe you." Yang Nianxue suddenly spread out her palm. "Little brother, it's time to split the money." Yi Xian was a little confused. "Split what money?" Yang Nianxue said angrily, "That senior gave you all his savings just now. Why, do you want to take it all for yourself?" Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Big sis, you don't have to worry about food and drink if you follow dad and the others, but I..." Yang Nianxue suddenly said, "If you don't split the money, I'll speak ill of you in front of my aunts in the future, and say that you're fooling around outside. Yi Xian's expression froze, and he hurriedly asked in his heart, Xiao Ta, how will this affect me? Xiao Ta was silent for a moment, and then he said, very much. Yi Xian was puzzled, what do you mean? Lil Tower sighed in a low voice. You're just letting them loose now, and the few matriarchs are all opposed to Master's actions. For example, Matriarch Ding from before. Didn't she help you before? Why did she help you? Because she is opposed to this kind of behavior. And little Nianxue is mainly going to ruin your reputation, then in the future, the other matriarchs will definitely strongly support Master to let you be. Not only that, but they will definitely not help you in the future. Most importantly, isn't your mother, who is also Matriarch Dongli, building up power for you all the time? How can she do that? There must be the help of other matriarchs in this. Speaking up to this point, it paused, and then continued, do you know why Master gave me to you? Yi Xian frowned slightly, didn't you take the initiative to follow me? After a moment of silence, Xiao Ta said, young Master, you're shameless. You even lie to yourself, I really have to give it to you. Yi Xian, Xiao Ta said, the reason why Master gave me to you was because of Matriarch Su's request. Matriarch Su is little Master Nianshue's biological mother. Back then, she was afraid that you would have a hard time outside, so she asked Master to give me to you. At this moment, Yi Xian said in a low voice, first of all, I thank Auntie Su for her kindness, but... Xiao Ta, touch your conscience and tell me, after you followed me in the early stages, other than acting cool and bragging, what else can you do? If it wasn't for Qing, who changed you a little, I would have thought that my father sent you to make my life more difficult. Xiao Ta. P.S. I've already saved a lot of scripts now, I'll wait for a good day to explode. Prepare your tickets, when I explode, I won't be human. Are you afraid? Chapter 2159. Yang Nianxue glared at Yi Xian when she saw him remain silent for a long time. Split the money. Yi Xian restrained his thoughts, glanced at Yang Nianxue, and then sighed softly. After that, he withdrew a spatial ring and passed it to Yang Nianxue. Yang Nianxue instantly beamed when she glanced at it. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, Big sister, I traveled so far to save you. Don't you have anything to show me? Yang Nianxue gazed at Yi Xian and said seriously, brother, if you think like that, then you're really narrow-minded. Don't pursue the benefits that are in front of you. You have to set your sights on the long term and the future. Understand? Yi Xian shook his head and felt a slight headache. Right at this moment, both of them suddenly turned around and saw numerous powerful auras sweep over from the horizon. The siblings furrowed their brows. Yang Nianxue hurriedly walked over to stand behind Yi Xian. Yi Xian was speechless. Meanwhile, 6 people appeared in front of Yi Xian. The person in the lead was an old man. The old man had white hair, an emaciated face, and a gaze that was sharp like the edge of a blade. Yang Nianxue hurriedly said by Yi Xian's side, they're from Mount Burial. Mount Burial. Yi Xian glanced at the old man and didn't say anything. The old man stared at Yi Xian, tell me who your backer is. Yi Xian was slightly stunned, and then he said, what do you mean? The old man's face remained emotionless, your backer decides our attitude towards you. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, 3 strikes of the sword. The old man frowned slightly, I've never heard of it. Kill. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished on the spot. He attacked right away. Yi Xian's face darkened. Right at this moment, the old man suddenly vanished mysteriously. In the next moment, the space and time here suddenly distorted, and then countless needle-like beams of white light shot towards Yi Xian like a storm amidst the distorted space and time. Yi Xian's brows knit together slightly. He opened his palm, and the green profound sword transformed into a sword shield that blocked in front of him. Bang! Boom 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 boom. Numerous explosions resounded incessantly in space. In the next moment, Yi Xian retreated explosively. Before he could stop, Yi Xian suddenly raised his head. At the moment he raised his head, a giant hand came crashing down like a mountain. It was not an ordinary giant hand. The giant hand contained powerful spacetime energy and undying energy. Yi Xian opened his palm and the green profound sword suddenly soared into the sky. Boom! After being struck by the green profound sword, the giant hand trembled violently before cracking apart. Right at this moment, an afterimage suddenly appeared in front of him. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly as he suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Boom! An expanse of sword light suddenly shattered. In the next moment, Yi Xian's figure was blasted flying at an extremely swift speed. In the blink of an eye, he'd moved over 30 kilometers back. As soon as he stopped moving, the space he resided in had suddenly transformed into an enormous black vortex. The terrifying black vortex was suffused with a terrifying suction force, and countless strands of suction force were madly tearing at his body. At the same time, the old man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian, and a wisp of ferocity flashed through his eyes. Die, old man. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly clenched his right fist and smashed it forward. Bang! At the instant that he punched forward, an expanse of golden light suddenly swept out from his fist. The golden light contained countless strange and tiny symbols, and every single one of them represented a law, and each law represented a Tao. Yi Xian's expression instantly turned unsightly when the old man punched forward. Damn it! This old man is at the eternal immortal realm. He concealed his cultivation just now. This burial mountain is really amazing. He actually sent an eternal immortal realm expert directly. Wouldn't it be normal for him to send a few weaker ones to let me practice? Yi Xian didn't dare to think too much about it. When facing this punch, he didn't dare to be careless in the slightest. He didn't choose to defend himself, and he took a step forward and stabbed forward with his sword. The attack was very calm as water. However, the expression of the old man who was right next to him changed drastically. His pupils shrank to the size of needles in an instant, as if he had encountered something terrifying. In the next moment, the fear in his eyes turned into madness. Then let's die together. As soon as he finished speaking, he used all the strength in his body and punched forward. In an instant, golden light that was like the scorching sun caused the entire expanse of space to seethe. Bang! Yi Xian's entire body was blasted away like a kite that had its string cut. Moreover, strands of strange golden light flickered around his body, and with every strand of golden light, Yi Xian spat out a mouthful of blood essence. Finally, after retreating for hundreds of thousands of meters, Yi Xian finally stopped, and when he did, his face was ghastly pale. Yi Xian lowered his head to look at his body. Arya's battle armor was still there, and there was nothing wrong with it. However, there was a huge problem with his physical body. He was heavily injured. The battle armor was powerful, but his physical body wasn't. It had to be said that Yi Xian's expression was slightly solemn. If Arya's battle armor hadn't blocked most of the force, he would have died under this punch. Yi Xian raised his head to look at the old man in the distance. At this moment, the old man's body was gradually becoming illusory. The old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Slash the future. You can actually return to the past and slash the future. Yi Xian nodded. That's right. After a long silence, the old man said, "Why haven't you been erased by the law of time?" Yi Xian said, "Do you know the Time Master?" Hearing this, the old man's pupils suddenly shrank. You know the Time Master? Yi Xian nodded. That's right. The old man said in a trembling voice. I just asked if you have a backer. Why didn't you say that this is the Time Master? If you had said that, even if the old man had 10,000 guts, the old man wouldn't have dared to attack you. Yi Xian glanced at the old man. The three swords are much more powerful than the Time Master. The old man's expression froze. Yi Xian suddenly asked, "Is the Time Master very powerful?" A trace of confusion flashed in the old man's eyes. "That's a godlike existence." "A godlike existence." Yi Xian fell silent. Did he underestimate the Time Master's strength? In truth, he couldn't be blamed. It was the Time Master who was too humble. When he first met the Time Master was kneeling. Of course, he neglected one thing, and that was the Time Master wasn't kneeling to him, Yi Xian. At this time, the old man in the distance disappeared completely. Erased. Watching the old man disappear, Yi Xian fell silent. He realized that he had underestimated the eternal immortal realm expert. With his current strength, although he could kill an eternal immortal realm expert, the old man could kill him too. If he hadn't hurriedly activated the second Yi battle armor, his soul would have been obliterated. Eternal immortal realm. Yi Xian took a deep breath. It seemed like he had to reach the mortal body realm as soon as possible. The current him had the divine star veins. It wouldn't be a problem for him to reach the mortal body realm. At this time, young Nianxue walked up to Yi Xian. She glanced at Yi Xian and asked, "Are you all right?" Yi Xian chuckled bitterly, "What do you think?" Young Nianxue hesitated for a moment, and then she opened her palm. A white pill appeared in her palm, and before Yi Xian could react, she placed the pill into Yi Xian's mouth. As soon as the pill entered his body, Yi Xian's body instantly recovered. In an instant, Yi Xian was stunned. He had the body of defiance and possessed the terrifying undying bloodline. Therefore, his body's self-recovery speed was extremely terrifying. However, even so, it still required a certain amount of time. Yet, this elixir allowed his shattered physical body to recover in an instant. Yi Xian looked at young Nianxue with astonishment. "Big sister, that pill was?" Young Nianxue spoke indifferently, "Father left it for me." "Didn't he give it to you?" Yi Xian's face froze, and he felt like a knife had been stabbed in his heart. "He did." Like hell. An indescribable flame of rage arose in Yi Xian's heart. Not to mention a pill, father didn't even give him a single strand of hair. Moreover, he'd even taken 3 strands of sword chi from him. He really isn't human. Meanwhile, young Nianxue suddenly said, "What's wrong?" Yi Xian sighed softly and didn't say anything. Young Nianxue hesitated for a moment and said, "Are you angry at father?" Yi Xian shook his head, "No." Young Nianxue puckered her lips, "Why not?" As she spoke, she withdrew a white jade bottle and passed it to Yi Xian. "This is for you." Yi Xian glanced at it. "What is it?" Young Nianxue said, "Medicinal pills. I have 5 left. I'll give you 3 and keep 2 for myself." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, "Big sister, I'm not used to you suddenly being so nice to me." Young Nianxue glared at Yi Xian. "Do you want it or not?" Yi Xian promptly put away the white jade bottle. "Of course I want it." Young Nianxue rolled her eyes at Yi Xian, then said, "Little brother, do you think that Burial Mountain and the God's Land will drop the matter?" Yi Xian calmly said, "Let's go and find them." Young Nianxue looked at Yi Xian. "Go and find them?" Yi Xian shrugged his shoulders. "Of course we're going to find them. I don't like to be passive." Young Nianxue hesitated for a moment, then said, "Can you defeat them? They should have eternal immortal realm powerhouses." Yi Xian smiled. "I can't defeat them." Young Nianxue frowned. "You can't defeat them, but you still want to go?" Yi Xian blinked. "They don't know that I can't defeat them." Young Nianxue was speechless. He brought young Nianxue to Burial Mountain. Not long after, the brother and sister arrived at Burial Mountain. As soon as they arrived at Burial Mountain, more than 10 divine consciousnesses locked onto the brother and sister. Young Nianxue promptly stood behind Yi Xian. At that time, Xiaota suddenly said, "Little master, little mistress Nianshue's strength is so weak, so why are you bringing her?" Yi Xian smiled faintly and said in his heart, Xiao Ta, let me ask you, what is elder sister's status in the family? Xiao Ta was silent for a moment, then said, compared to you, the difference is like heaven and earth. Yi Xian furiously said in his heart, I didn't ask you to compare her to me. If you don't know how to speak, then don't say it. Xiao Ta was speechless. Yi Xian took a deep breath and said, elder sister's status in the family is so high, so do you think that father will let anything happen to her? Xiao Ta said in a low voice, he won't. If something happens to little Mistress Nianxue, Master will definitely panic. He is very afraid of Matriarch Su. Speaking up to this point, he paused and then said, with little Mistress Nianxue around, she will definitely be fine. In that case, she is equivalent to your protective talisman. F***CK. Little master, you even betrayed your own elder sister, you are really inhuman. But I like it. Hee hee. Young Nianxue looked at Yi Xian, not saying anything, and her expression was very cold. Yi Xian suddenly said, Xiao Ta, did you forget to soundproof your words? Xiao Ta was speechless. Chapter 2160. It's over. Xiao Ta's voice suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's mind. The next moment, young Nianxue directly took Xiao Ta away, leaving Yi Xian alone in the field. Very soon, at the end of the distant horizon, Yi Xian heard Xiao Ta's mournful scream. Yi Xian, resist? Xiao Ta naturally did not dare to resist young Nianxue. He resisted Yi Xian but did not dare to resist young Nianxue. Who did not know that young Nianxue was the princess of the Yang family? Yi Xian shook his head. This Xiao Ta did not even use his brain when he spoke. Really? What a sin. Not caring about Xiao Ta and young Nianxue, Yi Xian raised his head and looked into the distance. Not far away, there stood an old man. The old man wore a blood-red robe. His hair was white and there were some strange runes on his face. His entire body was filled with an evil aura. Yi Xian smiled and said, You are the mountain master of Burial Mountain? The old man said hoarsely, Yes. Yi Xian suddenly pointed at the old man angrily, How dare you send people to kill me? Who gave you the guts? Don't you know who I am? The old man stared at Yi Xian. Old man is a little curious. Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and the mysterious heaven token appeared in his hand. Do you know what token this is? The old man's expression was rather ugly. Mysterious heaven token. Yi Xian smiled and said, Do you know what relationship I have with the owner of Celestial Treasure Pavilion? The old man stared at Yi Xian and did not speak. Yi Xian suddenly walked towards the old man. Seeing this, the old man frowned. What are you doing? Yi Xian smiled and said, Don't you want to kill us, brother and sister? Come on, beat me to death. The old man's expression was rather ugly. Yi Xian continued, Come and kill me. I promise I won't call anyone. The old man, at this moment, many experts from Burial Mountain appeared in the surroundings. When they saw how arrogant Yi Xian was, their faces were unsightly to the extreme. Too damn arrogant. How inhumane. Someone was about to attack, but he was stopped by Burial Mountain's lord. The profound heaven token. With this token, it meant that Yi Xian had obtained the approval of the pavilion master of the Celestial Treasure Pavilion, and the pavilion master, when he thought up to here, Burial Mountain's expression couldn't help but become solemn. He was extremely fearful towards the master of the Celestial Treasure Pavilion because he'd been taught a lesson by the master of the Celestial Treasure Pavilion. He was an indescribably terrifying person. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly said, Don't all of you want to kill me? Come on. The elder collected his thoughts and looked at Yi Xian. Young man, don't push your luck. Although you are. At this point, his pupils suddenly constricted. In the next moment, everyone watched as the old man's body became illusory. He slashed forward. All the experts from Burial Mountain were stunned when they witnessed this scene. What's going on? The old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian while terror filled his eyes. Time. How can you return to the past? That's impossible. Yi Xian was quite puzzled. Isn't returning to the past very simple? What? You don't know how to do it? The old man was speechless. The old man intended to say something, but a ray of light flashed in the next moment. Hiss. The old man was completely annihilated. Yi Xian opened his palm, and the green profound sword returned to his grasp. He glanced at the surroundings. Who else? Who else? The eyes of the experts from Mount Burial were filled with fear. Instantly annihilating an eternal realm expert? That was too terrifying. Yi Xian was about to attack when the experts from Burial Mountain suddenly fled in all directions. They were extremely swift, and they vanished from Yi Xian's field of vision in the blink of an eye. Yi Xian didn't pursue them. He opened his palm, and the spatial ring of Burial Mountain's lord appeared in his hand. He glanced at it, and there were a few hundred star god veins. A few hundred. Yi Xian put the spatial ring away and turned around. Meanwhile, young Nianxue walked over with Xiao Ta. Yi Xian was speechless. Young Nianxue gazed at Yi Xian. You dealt with Burial Mountain? Yi Xian nodded. Young Nianxue was quite curious. How did you do it? Yi Xian smiled and said, previously, we killed an eternal immortal realm expert from Zhongshan. I guessed that there were not many experts of this level in Zhongshan. Therefore, after I confirmed that they only had one eternal immortal realm expert, I casually killed him. So, they're gone. Young Nianxue gazed at Yi Xian. It's that simple? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Do you think it's very difficult? Young Nianxue gave him a thumbs up, as expected of my little brother. Amazing. Yi Xian, young Nianxue glanced around, and then she said, did you get any treasures? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he took out a spatial ring. This is the spatial ring of the Mountain Lord from before. There are a few hundred star god veins in it. As usual, half each. As he spoke, he took out half and gave it to young Nianxue. Young Nianxue stared at Yi Xian and smiled. Little brother, why are you suddenly so generous? Yi Xian smiled. We're siblings. Young Nianxue glanced suspiciously at Yi Xian. I don't believe that you've suddenly become so generous. Yi Xian roared with laughter. Didn't you give me medicinal pills just now? Young Nianxue hesitated for a moment, and then she said, actually, I have more than 5 of those medicinal pills. Yi Xian was slightly curious. Then how many do you have? Young Nianxue glanced at Yi Xian. A few hundred. Yi Xian's expression froze when he heard this. A few hundred. Oh my god. Is this what a second generation is like? Fuck. Yi Xian's expression became unsightly. They're all from the same father, so the difference in treatment is too great. Meanwhile, young Nianxue took out a spatial ring and passed it to Yi Xian. There are 200 pills in here. Keep them and use them. They're extremely precious, and my father specially asked someone to refine them for me. A single one is worth a city, so use them sparingly. Yi Xian sighed softly, and he felt very uncomfortable in his heart. Young Nianxue said softly, are you angry? Yi Xian shook his head. Young Nianxue smiled, and said, actually, I once talked to my mother about you. I asked her why my father let you live. Do you know what she said? Yi Xian was slightly curious, and he asked, what did she say? Young Nianxue smiled, and said, she said that my father has very high hopes for you. He knows very well that if he keeps you by his side, then you'll forever be a second-generation heir, and you'll never be able to surpass him. Letting you live is equivalent to putting you outside of his circle, and you have unlimited possibilities. Yi Xian fell silent. Young Nianxue smiled faintly, and said, he's never thought of letting me surpass him. To him, it's enough that I'm happy for the rest of my life. And he has the ability to let me live a carefree life for the rest of my life. However, I don't really want this kind of life. I also want to work hard to surpass him, and I want to make him look at me in a different light. Xiao Ta suddenly said, "It seems that master letting me follow young master isn't entirely because of Mistress Su, he definitely wants me to surpass him. When heaven is about to bestow a great responsibility upon me, it must first torture my will, and tire my muscles and bones. It turns out that I've never understood master's good intentions." Yi Xian, young Nianxue, shook her head, and smiled, and said, "Xiao Ta, your temperament has changed too much. You weren't like this in the past." Xiao Ta sighed in a low voice, and said, "When I followed master in the past, who didn't give me, Xiao Ta, some face? Ever since I followed young master, my treatment directly fell from heaven to hell. No one gave me, Xiao Ta, any face anymore. I'm suffering." Yi Xian's face was full of black lines, and he said, "Xiao Ta, I let Qing, transform you." Xiao Ta hesitated for a moment, then said, "Young master, next time ask elder sister Heaven's will to transform me even more formidable. Your enemy's transformation speed is too fast, so fast that I can't keep up with his footsteps." Yi Xian, at that time, young Nianxue suddenly said, "Brother, what should we do next? Go to the land of gods?" Yi Xian nodded. "Let's go." After saying that, the brother and sister disappeared from their spot. Before long, Yi Xian and young Nianxue reached the land of gods. Just as they arrived, Yi Xian frowned. The next instant, his pupils shrank, and he suddenly pulled out his sword to slash. Bang! A wave of sword radiance suddenly broke out. Yi Xian retreated thousands of feet away. As soon as he stopped, a weird enchantment suddenly appeared around him. Yi Xian frowned slightly, and he looked into the distance where an old man was standing. The old man was illusory, a soul body. The old man glanced at Yi Xian and said, "He is indeed somewhat extraordinary. No wonder they summoned me ahead of time." Ancestor summoning. Upon hearing that, Yi Xian's complexion instantly turned unsightly. The land of gods had surprisingly summoned their ancestor ahead of time. "Who exactly are you?" the old man suddenly said. Yi Xian was about to speak, but at that moment, the old man narrowed his eyes. "Future beheading." After saying that, he suddenly clenched his right hand into a fist and smashed it forward. Bang! The space and time around the old man began to distort, and the next instant, it shattered. The wisp of the old man's soul was forced to retreat several thousand feet away. Yi Xian's complexion became extremely unsightly. The opponent had surprisingly blocked his future beheading. The opponent had also returned to the past. This wasn't an eternal immortal realm expert, but a powerhouse above it. In the distance, the old man fixed his gaze on Yi Xian. "Who exactly are you? How did you enter the river of time?" Yi Xian looked at the old man. "How did you enter the river of time?" Upon hearing that, the old man's expression became somewhat strange. Upon seeing the old man's expression, Yi Xian frowned. Did he say something wrong? "Who exactly are you?" the old man suddenly said in a deep voice. Yi Xian spread open his palm, and the profound cyan sword appeared in it. "I am the person who wants your life." After saying that, the profound cyan sword in his hand suddenly flew out. In the distance, the pupils of the old man shrank. Future beheading. Present beheading. Could it be done like that? After sensing Yi Xian's terrifying sword, the old man was greatly shocked. He suddenly took out a talisman, and in the next moment, he suddenly pinched it, and the talisman directly burned. Following that, the space and time he was in was actually enveloped by a mysterious power. In the distance, Yi Xian frowned. He discovered that his future beheading was actually trapped in the river of time. What's going on? The old man glared at Yi Xian angrily. How dare you go against time and go to the past without permission? Do you know that you have committed a capital crime? A heinous capital crime. The time law enforcer will imprison your soul and imprison you in the infinite world forever. As soon as he finished speaking, an extremely terrifying aura suddenly attacked from the endless river of time. The Time Executioner. Yi Xian fell silent. In the distance, the old man suddenly laughed. "Ha, it's here. It's really here. You're dead. The Time Executioner really came. Just wait for your death." Chapter 2161. Yi Xian looked towards the distance. Space had suddenly been torn apart there, and then a strange black-robed figure floated out of it. The black-robed figure was like a ghost. His entire body was enveloped by a black robe, and his appearance couldn't be seen. Moreover, he held a blood-red sickle in his hand. Danger. The first feeling that Yi Xian had when he saw the black-robed figure was that it was dangerous, extremely dangerous. Yi Xian frowned. This Time Enforcer is that strong? When the Time Enforcer appeared, the old man immediately bowed deeply. "Greetings, Venerable One." The Time Enforcer's gaze descended onto Yi Xian, the one who disrupted time. Yi Xian hadn't even spoken when the old man hurriedly said, "Exactly. Supremacy, this person disrupted time and forcefully returned to the past. Please punish him severely." The Time Enforcer stared at Yi Xian. "Why are you able to disrupted time?" Yi Xian didn't waste his breath at all, and he immediately activated the word that the Time Master had given him. The Time Enforcer was stunned when he saw the word appear between Yi Xian's brows. Time. That was the law of the Time Master. The old man was just about to speak when the Time Enforcer suddenly bowed respectfully to Yi Xian. "Please forgive me for my rudeness just now." The old man was petrified on the spot when he witnessed this scene. "What's going on?" Yi Xian glanced at the old man and said, "He hit me." The Time Enforcer hesitated for a moment before he said, "Understood." As he spoke, the sickle in his hand suddenly vanished. The old man's expression changed drastically, and he was about to attack. However, a strange scene appeared at this moment. Time seemed to have frozen where he stood, and everything had stopped. He could only watch helplessly as the sickle sliced through his throat. Hiss. The old man was directly erased, completely disappearing from this world. At practically the exact same moment, the sickle returned to the Time Enforcer's hand. Yi Xian was quite curious when he saw this, and he immediately asked, "What was that?" The Time Enforcer was puzzled. "What?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Did time stop where the old man was just now?" The Time Executor nodded. "Time stop." Yi Xian was curious. "How did you do it?" The Time Enforcer wanted to say something but hesitated. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Is it inconvenient to tell me?" The Time Enforcer shook his head. "Young Master has misunderstood. It's not that it's inconvenient to tell you, but young Master hasn't cultivated the time domain yet, so I don't know how to tell young Master." Yi Xian was a little curious. "Time domain?" The Time Enforcer nodded. He opened his palm and pressed it down lightly. In an instant, a mysterious barrier appeared. The Time Enforcer said, "Using time to form a domain. In this domain, time can stop. Those with profound cultivation can even make the flow of time in the domain different from the outside world. For example, 6 hours in the domain is actually equivalent to 2 hours in the outside world." Hearing this, Yi Xian was stunned. "Isn't this the same as Xiaota?" Yi Xian hurriedly asked. "The flow of time in the time domain is different from the outside world. What's the limit?" The Time Enforcer fell silent for a moment before he said, "The most exaggerated thing I've seen is that someone can achieve a difference of 10 times. In other words, 10 days in the time domain is equivalent to 1 day in the outside world." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, 10 times? The Time Enforcer nodded. "Yes. Isn't it terrifying?" Yi Xian's expression became slightly strange. "Isn't this terrifying?" The Time Enforcer was stunned. "Isn't it terrifying?" Yi Xian said seriously, "Brother, come, I'll take you somewhere." As he spoke, he led the Time Enforcer into Xiao Ta. After entering Xiao Ta, the Time Enforcer was stunned. In the next moment, his expression changed drastically, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. This. Fuck, Xiao Ta sighed softly, this is the result of not studying properly. When you encounter something, you can only say, fuck, to express your shock. Yi Xian, at this moment, the Time Enforcer suddenly looked at Yi Xian and said with a trembling voice, this. Young master, how did you do this? Yi Xian smiled, I don't know either. In any case, someone help me do it. The Time Enforcer hurriedly asked, Time Master? Yi Xian shook his head. The Time Enforcer's face was full of shock, this. How is this possible? Such a divine ability is simply too heaven-defying. No, that's impossible. Yi Xian smiled without saying anything. The Time Enforcer was silent. Impossible? Then what was he seeing in front of him? Was it a dream? The Time Enforcer's mind was in a mess. After a long time, the Time Enforcer looked at Yi Xian, young master, how strong is the person who reversed the time here? Yi Xian smiled, brother, let's not discuss this. I want to ask you how to cultivate this time domain. The Time Enforcer said solemnly, young master, with this tower, you don't need to cultivate time domain anymore. This is too heaven-defying. Yi Xian shook his head, I want to have this ability myself. After a moment of silence, the Time Enforcer said, if an outsider wants to cultivate time domain, it will be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. This is because to cultivate time domain, one must meet two conditions. The first is to have a time cultivation permit. Only those with this permit can enter the river of time to cultivate various Tao of time, including this time domain. Otherwise, once an ordinary person enters to explore time, they will be sent into the seamless world by the time laws. Yi Xian said solemnly, time cultivation permit. Do you have a monopoly on it? The Time Enforcer smiled awkwardly, no, young master doesn't know. This Tao of time is extraordinary. If people are allowed to wantonly change and tamper with it, this world will be in chaos. Moreover, the one who made these rules is the Time Master. The Time Master is condensed from the river of time's spiritual wisdom. He represents time, so he can choose who manages time. Without his authorization, an ordinary person who enters the river of time and changes time will be erased by the time laws. Yi Xian was a bit surprised. He had thought that the Time Master was a person, but he had not expected that he was the spiritual wisdom of the river of time, which was equivalent to a world's tendo. However, it was clear that this Time Master was much fiercer than an ordinary tendo. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian asked again, didn't you say that there are two conditions to cultivate time domain? What's the other one? The Time Enforcer said solemnly, the other one is to sneak in. Some experts will use some special methods to enter the river of time and hide it from us, making it so that we can't sense it and the time laws can't sense it. Of course, this method generally has a time limit. It can only temporarily enter the river of time and reverse time. Even if they cultivate time domain, they don't dare to use it for too long. However, these people are generally extremely strong because they can enter and cultivate time domain. This means that their abilities are very terrifying, especially in terms of their bodies and souls. Yi Xian asked, have you seen many of these people? The Time Enforcer said, many. Many. Yi Xian was silent. A moment later, he asked again, what level do I belong to in this endless universe? The Time Enforcer sized up Yi Xian and said, young master can cut the future and the past. This ability is very heaven-defying. It's just that your body and soul aren't strong enough. If they both reach eternal immortality, young master's strength will be even more terrifying. Yi Xian nodded slightly, I have the time laws, so it's very easy to cultivate time domain, right? The Time Enforcer nodded, don't be too simple. With that, he flicked his finger, and a white light entered between Yi Xian's eyebrows. Soon, countless pieces of information entered Yi Xian's mind. Cultivate time domain. A moment later, Yi Xian opened his palm, and in an instant, the space-time around him formed an invisible barrier. Time domain. Yi Xian was stunned. It's that simple? The Time Enforcer said solemnly, "Young master, you have the time laws that the Time Master gave you. If you want to form a time domain, it won't be too easy because the River of Time will take the initiative to cooperate with you." Yi Xian nodded, "I understand." The Time Enforcer hesitated for a moment and said, "Young master, may I ask what is your relationship with the Time Master?" Yi Xian blinked and said, "Very good. Very good. Very good." The Time Enforcer, Yi Xian smiled, "If you go back and see him, you can ask him yourself." The Time Enforcer shook his head and smiled bitterly, "We won't have the chance to meet the Time Master." Yi Xian was puzzled, why? The Time Enforcer's smile became even more bitter. The Time Master controls the Tao of Time, and he isn't someone a small enforcer like us can meet. Hearing this, Yi Xian understood. His level wasn't high enough. At this moment, he suddenly realized that he had underestimated the Time Master's strength and identity. He should be a super big shot. Of course, there was a reason why he had underestimated the Time Master. This big shot knelt as soon as they met. At this moment, the Time Enforcer suddenly raised his head. In the next moment, he frowned. Yi Xian asked, "What's wrong?" The Time Enforcer said in a low voice, "Young master, I have a mission. I have to go." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian, "If you have time in the future, you can come to the Time Court as a guest." After saying that, he was about to leave. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Wait." The Time Enforcer looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, "Brother, this. I've been short on money recently. I wonder if it's convenient for you to lend me some star god meridians." Hearing this, the Time Enforcer's expression froze. Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Reimbursement, reimbursement." The Time Enforcer blinked, "Reimbursement? Who?" Yi Xian said seriously, "Of course it's the Time Master, my good brother." The Time Enforcer, Yi Xian continued, "Lend me 1,000 star god meridians, and then go to him for reimbursement of 1,500. Do you understand what I mean?" The Time Enforcer. Chapter 2162. Reimbursement. The Time Enforcer hesitated for a moment before saying, "What if he doesn't reimburse me?" Yi Xian smiled. "Go to him for reimbursement. He will definitely reimburse you. If he doesn't, come to me. I will compensate you double." The Time Enforcer was still hesitant. Yi Xian smiled. "Why not give it a try?" After a moment of silence, the Time Enforcer said, "I'll lend you 2,000 star god veins. I'll reimburse you 3,000, is that okay?" Yi Xian's expression froze. This guy was a ruthless person. The Time Enforcer took out a storage ring and handed it to Yi Xian. "Young master, this is my savings over the years. You keep it well." Yi Xian hurriedly put away the storage ring and said, "Brother, you actually have so many star god veins. Your Time Court's treatment is quite good." The Time Enforcer shook his head and smiled. To be honest, the treatment of the Time Court is not bad. However, we still earn some extra money. Hearing this, Yi Xian immediately understood. The Time Enforcer was still hesitant. Can it really be reimbursed? Yi Xian said with a smile, "Of course." The Time Enforcer cupped his fists. "Thank you for the opportunity, young master." Yi Xian smiled. "My name is Yi Xian." The Time Enforcer smiled. "My name is Zhang Han. Brother Yi, we will meet again." With that, he left Xiao Ta. At this moment, Xiao Ta suddenly said, "Young master, can he really be reimbursed?" Yi Xian nodded. "Definitely." Xiao Ta said solemnly, "If he can be reimbursed, Then why don't you find the time enforcer yourself? You even let him earn 1,000. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. You're too narrow-minded. Xiao Ta, Yi Xian explained, what I value is not only the star god veins, but also the connections. These time enforcers are so powerful. If I were to befriend them, the benefits I would obtain in the future would not be limited to this. Many times, connections are more important than money. After a moment of silence, Xiao Ta said, You're the young master. Whatever you say goes. Yi Xian was speechless. Meanwhile, young Nianxue, who'd been silent until now, suddenly grinned and said, Little brother. Hearing this, Yi Xian suddenly felt a headache. This sister. Was it time for him to part ways with her? Young Nianxue looked at Yi Xian and smiled, not saying a word. Yi Xian felt a little helpless, and then took out half of the 3,000 star god veins and gave it to her. Young Nianxue grinned as she put the star god vein away, and then she said, Brother, you're really something. I won't take your star god vein for nothing. I'll take you to a place where there are many opportunities to get rich. Yi Xian frowned. Where? The corners of young Nianxue's mouth lifted. Middle world. Yi Xian shook his head. I've never heard of it. Young Nianxue smiled. Of course you haven't. That place is very far from here. My father took me there all those years ago. It's a very prosperous place, and, as she spoke, she smiled mysteriously. There's a mysterious race there called the Heavenly Spirit Race. All the members of the Heavenly Spirit Race are women, and all of them are as beautiful as flowers. Yi Xian said with a straight face, I, your brother, am a decent man. A decent person. Young Nianxue glanced at Yi Xian. As if I'd believe you. Yi Xian was speechless. Young Nianxue continued, Do you want to go play? Yi Xian was just about to speak when his pupils constricted abruptly. In the next moment, he and young Nianxue directly left the tiny pagoda, and he saw a woman outside. The woman wore a simple cotton dress and carried a small bamboo basket on her back. Within the bamboo basket was a fishing rod. The woman had short hair, and her eyes were calm like water. Yi Xian's expression instantly changed when he saw the bamboo basket on the woman's back. She was the mysterious big shot who'd killed the old man from the ruins. Because the old man had told him to be careful of the bamboo basket on his back before he'd vanished. The old man had actually found his way here. This is going a little too far. There's no enmity between us, yet she's still relentlessly pursuing us. The woman gazed at Yi Xian in silence. Young Nianxue hid behind Yi Xian again. The woman's gaze suddenly descended onto the green profound sword in Yi Xian's hand, and she frowned slightly. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, You are? The woman suddenly opened her right hand. In the next moment, the inheritance scroll that the old man had given her appeared in her hand. She squeezed it lightly, and the inheritance scroll instantly transformed into ashes. Yi Xian's face instantly fell when he witnessed this scene. You've gone too far. The woman gazed at Yi Xian. You're not convinced? Yi Xian suddenly spoke angrily, I'm not convinced. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly drew his sword and slashed. A slash to the present and a slash to the past. It was a lethal move as soon as he attacked. Because this person was truly too strong. However, Yi Xian's pupils suddenly constricted as soon as he attacked, and then he wasn't even able to react before his figure was blasted flying into the seamless world. After his figure stopped, Yi Xian was stunned. Damn it. The future. He'd been beaten by this woman in the past. She could enter the future as well. In the distance, the woman in the bamboo basket glanced at Yi Xian, and her expression was calm as water. Yi Xian utilized the temporal laws to leave the seamless world. A wisp of a ferocious expression flashed through his eyes as he gazed at the woman, and he attacked once more. However, he'd only just attacked when a strange palm print suddenly appeared on his chest. In the next moment, Bang! Yi Xian was blasted flying again, and this time, he flew out of his field of vision. When he stopped, he was in the seamless world again. Fortunately, the temporal laws here didn't target him, otherwise, he would have been obliterated by now. Fortunately, he had Arya's armor on him. Otherwise, his body would have probably been gone by now. The woman glanced at Yi Xian and said, "Continue. Continue." Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes, and then his figure instantly became illusory. At practically the exact same moment, the woman's figure became illusory as well. In the blink of an eye, both of them had arrived in the river of time, and the space they resided in right now was the space of the past. Yi Xian's expression became rather unsightly when he saw the woman return to the past as well. He didn't think too much about it and suddenly attacked. At the instant that the green profound sword slashed out, the entire river of time started seething. He'd attacked in the past. Moreover, he'd even executed future slash. It wasn't the present and the past, it was the past and the future. This attack was strange to the point even Yi Xian was unable to explain it. In any case, he possessed the temporal laws, so time creation was done. At this moment, the bamboo woman standing not far away frowned slightly. Obviously, Yi Xian's two messy sword moves made her a little confused. She didn't think too much about it, and then her figure suddenly became illusory. In the next moment, Yi Xian saw the woman split into two. One was in the past, and the other was in the past. What the fuck? Yi Xian was stunned. It can be done like this? In the next moment, both of Yi Xian's rays of light shattered abruptly, and then Yi Xian was blasted flying once more. This time, the river of time he resided in was directly shattered and obliterated, and then Yi Xian returned to reality. At this moment, a wisp of blood was slowly flowing down from the corner of his mouth. Meanwhile, the woman suddenly vanished on the spot. In the distance, Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly. He was just about to attack when he noticed to his astonishment that the space he resided in seemed to have frozen. Time had stopped moving. The woman had utilized the time domain. Yi Xian was shocked, and he hurriedly released his left hand, and the green profound sword suddenly slashed forward. Hiss! The spacetime barrier in front of him was directly torn apart by the green profound sword. However, at this moment, a fist suddenly smashed into the space between his brows. Rumble! Yi Xian felt the world spin around him, and then his mind went blank. After that, he was blasted flying. When Yi Xian stopped, he was completely dumbfounded. "I've been bashed." Meanwhile, Xiao Ta suddenly said, "Young master, it's enough." Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. "What do you mean?" Xiao Ta spoke solemnly. "In the past, you were only bashed after 3 days of being cool. Now, you've been cool for many days. Be content." Yi Xian was speechless. In the distance, the woman was about to attack again when Yang Nianxue suddenly said, "Sir, there's no enmity between us. Aren't you going too far by doing this?" The woman glanced at Yang Nianxue. "Are you going to fight on his behalf?" Yang Nianxue hurriedly retreated to the side. "Pretend I didn't say anything." Yi Xian was speechless. The woman withdrew her gaze and looked at Yi Xian in the distance. Her expression was still as calm as water. "Don't you think it's shameful to control the Tao of time by cheating?" "Cheating?" Yi Xian looked at the woman and smiled. "I'm not cheating. I'm openly controlling the Tao of time." As soon as he finished speaking, he slowly closed his eyes. "Calm down. Focus." The green profound sword in Yi Xian's hand trembled slightly. In the distance, the woman stopped and looked at Yi Xian as she slowly clenched her right hand. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. In the next moment, he took Yang Nianxue with him and vanished on the spot. He didn't run. He used the green profound sword to teleport back to the mystic world. He teleported across countless stellar regions. Yi Xian and Yang Nianxue vanished. The woman was slightly stunned. Escaped? Not fighting anymore? Was this a swordsman? After a long time, the woman shook her head slightly. What the hell? With that, she turned and vanished on the spot. After returning to the mystic world, Yi Xian looked at the distant spacetime. Seeing that the woman didn't chase after him, he immediately heaved a sigh of relief. That woman's strength was too terrifying. She could actually return to the past. Moreover, didn't the time enforcer say that some powerhouses without the time usage certificate could only enter the river of time for a short period? Why could that woman stay in the river of time for so long? Moreover, the laws of time did not target her. This was not normal. At this moment, young Nianxue suddenly said in a deep voice, "It's really dangerous outside. When I was with father, I felt that father could hit anyone with a sword." As she said that, she looked at Yi Xian and said seriously, "Brother, there's still a gap between our strength and father's." Yi Xian shook his head with a bitter smile. Young Nianxue said in a deep voice, "What do we do now?" Yi Xian said, "Cultivate. Cultivate to the eternal immortal realm." With that, he entered Xiao Ta's body and took out all the star god veins he had obtained. Eternal immortality. He had to improve his body, soul, and will. At the side, young Nianxue looked at Yi Xian who was cultivating. After a moment of silence, she said, "Brother, I have a treasure here that can quickly improve your strength. There are no side effects, and it only costs 3,000 star god veins. Do you want it?" Yi Xian. Chapter 2163. Yi Xian shook his head and sighed when he heard young Nianxue. "Damn it. This is my older sister. My older sister whose blood is thicker than water." Young Nianxue rolled her eyes at Yi Xian when she saw his expression. "I gave you a discount." Yi Xian spoke indifferently, "I have the divine star bloodline, so I can attain the immortal body realm." Young Nianxue hurriedly said, "If you want to cultivate your body, then this is even more useful to you." She withdrew a white jade bottle as she spoke. "Do you know what this is?" Yi Xian glanced at the white jade bottle. "Nothing can possibly be worth a few thousand divine star bloodlines." Young Nianxue suddenly said, "Aria's blood." Aria's blood. Yi Xian was stunned. Young Nianxue smiled. "This is her blood from when she was at her peak. Just a single drop will guarantee that you'll attain the immortal body realm. Moreover, it won't be an ordinary body. If you can attain the immortal body realm with Aria's blood, then your body will definitely be the strongest in this realm." Aria's blood. Needless to say, Yi Xian was slightly tempted. Just as young Nianxue said, if he could devour Aria's blood, then his body would definitely attain an extremely terrifying level. Young Nianxue blinked. "Are you going to buy it or not?" Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he said, "Big sister, can I give you a discount?" Young Nianxue shook her head. "No." Yi Xian glared at young Nianxue. "You're my biological sister." Young Nianxue chuckled. "Even my biological father is useless." Yi Xian was speechless, and then he glanced at the white jade bottle in young Nianxue's hand and asked, "How many drops?" Young Nianxue blinked. "Only a single drop." Yi Xian didn't waste his breath, and he flicked his finger, causing a spatial ring to fall in front of young Nianxue. Young Nianxue glanced at the spatial ring, and then her eyes narrowed as she smiled, and then she passed the white jade bottle to Yi Xian. Yi Xian took the white jade bottle and opened it. There was indeed only one drop. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian gave young Nianxue a thumbs up. "Sister, you're a ruthless person." Young Nianxue giggled. "Brother, let me tell you, if I sell Aria's blood, I can sell it for 10,000 star divine veins. Do you believe me?" Yi Xian pursed his lips and ignored young Nianxue. He directly swallowed the drop of blood, and as soon as he swallowed it, his entire body ignited. F***CK. Yi Xian jumped up. "It's that scary?" At this moment, he felt his physical body disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Yang Mianxue glared at Yi Xian. Are you crazy? How dare you swallow it like that? Yi Xian was shocked. I have swallowed Arya's blood before, but it was not so horrible. Yang Mianxue said, that was in the past. Arya will also become stronger. Do you think you're the only one improving in the entire universe? Yi Xian, at this moment, Yang Mianxue glared at Yi Xian angrily. Prodigal. You're really a prodigal. As she spoke, she took out another snow lotus and stuffed it into Yi Xian's mouth. As soon as the snow lotus entered his mouth, the flames all over Yi Xian's body dimmed a lot. At this moment, Yang Mianxue took out another elixir and stuffed it into Yi Xian's mouth. Big prodigal. Yi Xian, as the elixir entered his body, Yi Xian's originally burned body began to recover rapidly. Then, Yi Xian's body began to absorb the energy of Arya's drop of blood. It had to be said that Arya's blood was extraordinarily terrifying. Although there was the snow lotus to suppress it, Yi Xian still felt as if his body was on fire, and it was somewhat unbearable. At this moment, Yang Mianxue suddenly took out a dark purple talisman and stuck it directly on Yi Xian's head. You prodigal. As soon as the talisman was stuck on Yi Xian's body, rays of golden light suddenly poured out of the talisman and finally flowed into Yi Xian's body. Boom! Yi Xian's body directly boiled. Yi Xian hurriedly said, Sis, what's going on? Why do I feel like my body is going to explode? Yang Mianxue glared at Yi Xian. I'll blow you up. Yi Xian, at this moment, Yang Mianxue opened her palm and a tree branch suddenly appeared in her hand. Looking at the tree branch in her hand, a trace of reluctance flashed in Yang Mianxue's eyes, but she still placed it on Yi Xian's head. In an instant, a large amount of dark green liquid gushed out of the tree branch and flowed into Yi Xian's body. Boom! When the liquid entered Yi Xian's body, Yi Xian felt like his whole body was going to completely explode at this moment. Yang Mianxue retreated to the side, but she was still cursing. What a huge loss. What a huge loss. Those things that she had used on Yi Xian earlier were all supreme-grade godly items. Any one of them could be sold for a fortune. And now, they were all used by this guy. The more Yang Mianxue thought about it, the angrier she got. Just like that, Yi Xian began to absorb bit by bit, and gradually, his body began to undergo a qualitative change. After a long time, Yi Xian opened his eyes. His eyes were actually a mass of blood, but they quickly returned to normal. Yi Xian stood up and looked at his body. At this moment, there was actually a layer of luster on the surface of his skin. Yi Xian looked at Yang Mianxue. Sis, has my body reached the immortal body stage? Yang Mianxue shook her head. No. Yi Xian was stunned. Yang Mianxue spoke indifferently, your body is much stronger than an immortal body stage bull. Do you know how many godly items I used on you just now? Do you know what talismans those were? Those were body sculpting talismans. My father racked his brains to find them for me all those years ago. However, I don't like to cultivate my body, so I've never used them. As for those medicinal pills, those are divine physique pills. They were refined by an alchemist for hundreds of years, and the treasures contained within them are utterly unimaginable. As for those snow lotuses, they're divine treasures that hold down the world of the ice god dimension, and they contain boundless ice divinity energy. Try using your strength right now. Yi Xian suddenly clenched his right hand tightly. In an instant, the space around him was directly frozen, and even time itself was frozen. At this moment, time had stopped, and it was comparable to a time domain. Yi Xian was stunned by this scene. Is it really that amazing? Yang Mianxue continued, do you know what branch I gave you was? Yi Xian shook his head. Yang Mianxue spoke solemnly, the divine tree of life, the real divine tree of life. Moreover, it was nurtured by Whitey. That branch can bring people back to life. Your body itself has healing abilities, and the divine tree of life has strengthened your healing abilities. It's difficult for you to die now. Yi Xian glanced at his body, and sure enough, he noticed that his body contained many tiny green dots. The divine tree of life. Yi Xian looked at Yang Nianxue and smiled sheepishly. Big sister, you have so many godly items, yet you still came out to look for divine star veins. Yang Nianxue spoke indifferently. What, can't I? Yi Xian hurriedly said, yes, of course you can. Big sister, what other godly items do you have? Can you take them out and let me broaden my horizons? Yang Nianxue glared at Yi Xian. Don't even think about it. Yi Xian, Yang Nianxue said, let's go to the middle world. Yi Xian was a little curious. Big sister, you keep emphasizing going to the middle world. Is there a purpose? Yang Nianxue said solemnly, brother, your goal is to surpass Dad, right? Yi Xian subconsciously said, my goal is to kill him. After saying that, he immediately regretted it. *CK, I was too careless. Yang Nianxue gave him a thumbs up. You're awesome. Yi Xian blinked. You won't tell on me, right? Yang Nianxue chuckled. What do you think? Yi Xian, Yang Nianxue said seriously, let me tell you, if your goal is to surpass Dad, then you have to hurry up. Do you know about the middle world? Yi Xian shook his head. Yang Nianxue looked at Yi Xian. It's a place where geniuses are as common as dogs. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Is the martial Dao civilization very advanced? Yang Nianxue spoke indifferently. Dad took me there in the past. Do you know why Dad went there? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he said, he wouldn't have gone there to show off, right? Yang Nianxue glared at Yi Xian. Do you think it's always you? Dad went there because there are experts there. Yi Xian's expression instantly became solemn when he heard this. An expert who could be valued by his father was definitely not an ordinary expert. Yang Nianxue spoke in a low voice. That place is truly terrifying. The martial Dao civilization there is so prosperous that it far surpasses your imagination. Besides that, that big sister Nian of yours is there as well, and so are those women of yours. Yi Xian hurriedly said, big sister Nian, and Lanxiu, and the others are there? Yang Nianxue nodded, yes. Yi Xian smiled, let's go. Let's go to the middle world. Yang Nianxue gazed at Yi Xian. Do you know who that woman was? Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. Do you know? Yang Nianxue nodded. She's probably from the middle world. Yi Xian's brows knit together slightly. Why do you say that? Yang Nianxue spoke indifferently. She's probably that mysterious goddess Zhu Lu from the middle world. In the middle world, she's equally famous as the pavilion master of the celestial treasure pavilion, and they're said to be the two women that are the best at fighting in the middle world. Of course, after your big sister Nian went there, there was another. She paused for a moment and continued, that big sister Nian of yours is very good at fighting as well. 3 women. Yi Xian had a slightly strange expression on his face. Are all those that are good at fighting women? Yang Nianxue shook her head. They're only said to be the best at fighting. There are top-rate experts there, true top-rate experts. Yi Xian frowned slightly. They're that formidable? Yang Nianxue nodded, yes. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. Big sister, have you been there before? Yang Nianxue nodded, but she seemed to think of something and shook her head, no. Yi Xian glanced at Yang Nianxue. Big sister, do you have any enemies there? Yang Nianxue's face darkened. How could that be? Yi Xian fell silent. Fuck. His intuition told him that this big sister must have a plot for him to go to the middle world. Yang Nianxue continued, aren't you going to cultivate your divine soul? In the middle world, there's a divine item called the divine soul wood. This item is the best at nourishing the soul. If you can obtain it, you can easily reach the divine soul immortal realm. Yi Xian frowned, really? Yang Nianxue nodded, really? Yi Xian smiled, let's go. Let's go to the middle world. Yang Nianxue immediately beamed, "Little brother, let's go." After saying that, the brother and sister set off for the middle world. At this moment, Xiao Ta suddenly said, "Young master, with your intelligence, you should know that little Nianxue is trying to trick you. Why do you still want to go?" Yi Xian said in his heart, "Big sister must have many more divine items on her, understand?" After a long silence, Xiao Ta said, "You brother and sister are really abnormal. One is trying to trick the younger brother, the other is trying to trick the older sister. Old Yang's family is really unfortunate." Yi Xian. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.